Nevertheless, we'd like those who are in the audience right now to kindly take their seats, as our guest of honor is, I believe, very close. So we'd like to start off with the ceremonial oil lamp and our usual method of getting about the conference. So if all of you who've actually checked in, picked up your newspaper for the day, will sit down, relax, and maybe get a glimpse of what's on the Sri Lankan headlines. We'll start very shortly. Once again, it's fantastic having you here with us. We hope you've had a very good 3 days, going on a fourth. I believe we saved the best for last, and the last, which is the best, is going to be fantastic. I'll tell you about that in just a few minutes. So once again, requesting that you all take your relevant seats as we'll start shortly. Thank you. Start with the lighting of the ceremonial oil lamp, and to do the honors, I'd like to call on these very esteemed ladies and gentlemen to do the honors. Speaker today. He is a member of the opposition as well as a current member of parliament. This gentleman needs no introduction in a Sri Lankan context. He's one of the key economists in Sri Lanka, and he's in fact been highlighted on many talk shows relating to development and international matters. Please put your hands together as we welcome Dr. Harsha De Silva, member of parliament and consultant economist in Sri Lanka.
Good morning. Friday night, Saturday morning is always very difficult for everyone. But I'm glad at least we got 70-80% of the seats already filled. Let me first, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, thank the ICTA agency of Sri Lanka for inviting me. I was having a chat, cup of coffee with the president of WSA, and he said he was indeed happy to see an opposition member of parliament address this conference this morning. And he actually went on to assume that I might have good things to say about the government. But I said, don't take it too far, that thought. I'm not going to talk about the government at all this morning. Actually, I'm really humbled and honored to be here amongst what I read in the papers as the best of the best creative minds in the ICT field. Entrepreneurs who've created content. Peter was telling me about a particularly significant achievement of a device that can lead a blind man to the place where he or she wants to go. So you have been recognized for the contributions you're making to innovate products and processes so that people can live better lives. I think that's the objective here, whether it is in Mexico City, in Durban, or in Colombo. When I was asked to come here this morning, the ICTA agency asked me whether I can speak a few words on what works from a South Asian perspective. So I said, I will try, Chitrankani. I said, I will try. But when I sat down to think about it, I realized that I couldn't, that I'm not competent enough to speak about what works in the South Asian economy. And I figured it's like taking tea to Sri Lanka, right? Because here is in front of me the stars, right? And I am just a mere spectator here to learn from you. So instead of disappointing Chitrangani and everybody who wanted me to speak on this topic, I thought maybe I'll speak the opposite. What doesn't work? And I was going to take a personal example on what doesn't work. And I think it's not only relevant to me and the people who are involved in that little project or to Sri Lanka, but to everyone who is here. Because you can generalize what I'm trying to say. In one of my previous lives, looking to create efficiencies in markets, because like somebody said in introducing me, I'm an economist. I'm trying to see how we can improve efficiencies in markets using ICTs, and also ego in trying to prove that can be done, these things can be done, and spending a lot of money. We learn a very important lesson, that while content is certainly very important, what is most important is whether it will make money or not. Because unless it makes money, there is no real value in that content. When I say money, it doesn't necessarily have to be dollars and cents made in a private capacity. It can be funded because there is greater positive externalities in the product or the process that you innovate. But that's still money made. Because you can't create content and expect donors to fund you for ever and ever. So it has to have a commercial value, commercial viability. And the point I'm trying to make is that it all depends on value, but whose perception of value? That's the important thing. Because you as developers, brilliant minds, creative geniuses, thinking about innovating a product and a process. I was asking Pete and he was telling me how they evaluate the products and how they choose winners. And he said it's about technology, it's about the interface, it's about ease of use, it's about the depth of technology, it's about innovation. And also adding value to that technology. But what is not there is the commercial viability of what is being created. So the point is, value to whom? Perceived value of whom? So what one might think is very valuable and it has great utilitarian value, but if the person who you are targeting that to does not perceive that value as being something that he or she needs to pay 99 cents to purchase or $9.99 to purchase, then it's a failure. So I want to take an example of what I call a successful failure, because there is value, there was value, there will be value to what I'm going to say, the solution, the process, innovation. But at the time it was done, that was not sufficient for the users to put cash out on the table. Now, you've been here in Colombo for a few days. I'm sure you drove around a bit and you tasted Sri Lanka's tea, Ceylon tea. Not far from here is what is called the Colombo tea auction. It is 130 years old and it is the world's largest auction for tea. The global prices for tea are set in Colombo. There's nowhere, Sri Lanka has no other, or we cannot boast of setting the price of anything other than that here. Now think about this as techies. They've been using the same technology for 130 years. There's not one computer in that tea auction. Now think about what I'm talking here. Thousands upon thousands of small plantations. Some big ones, some half an acre, quarter acre, 2 acre plantations. 10,000 lots, meaning produce, or rather the tea sent to the auction to be sold on a weekly basis. Twice a week it's done, on a Tuesday and Wednesday. And prior to the actual auctioning of this tea, anywhere between 500,000 to 1 million samples are sent around to warehouses of various buyers representing some 140 countries. Right? Think about the process. See how complicated the process is. 500,000 to 1 million little samples sent to various agents of buyers who taste these different samples for blend. Objective ultimately is to purchase different lots from different plantations to ensure you can produce a particular blend. That blend may be different in Iraq, it may be different in parts of Russia, it may be something else in somewhere else in the Middle East. It is the palate, it is the taste. Now you have to get that right blend, because the kind of tea people drink in China is not the kind of tea people drink in Russia, for instance. So the objective is to go to this auction and purchase that blend at the lowest possible cost. Right? So, how is it done? There's a big room like this, much bigger room. All the buyers are sitting facing the podium. At the bottom of the pit here is an auctioneer. He will say lot number 4321, broken orange peco from Labukale plantation in Nuarelia. I see Mr. Apasinger for 150 rupees a kilo, sir. Mr. Apasinger says yes, and says Mr. Devapura 160 rupees a kilo. Do I see a bid over there? Mr. Akbar's got a bid for 180. Yeah, I see a bid over there. It actually came off the wall. Right? 180 for the gentleman over there. And it goes on like this. And finally sold to Peter, Labukale, broken orange peco, lot number 4312 for 260 rupees. Now what happens after that is a lot of back-end operation and accounting that takes place. Brokers need to find who the logistics providers are, etc., etc. Money needs to be put in banks. That money has to be then paid back to the plantation companies and so on. But from the buyer's point of view, there is just one lot of tea that that person had to purchase. In the case here, Peter, that broken orange peco labukale, he needs to buy a lot more to ensure that he, as the agent for Lipton sitting in London, can purchase that blend for the lowest possible price. As long as he continues to purchase at the lowest possible price, he gets paid and he gets his bonuses. If not, perhaps he will be fired. So he needs to ensure that he has this calculation in the back of his mind on a piece of paper, in a notebook, and keep adding it up and ensuring he purchases this. But for you, if you go in there, you'll think this is nonsense. Why would anybody want to do this? Right? So that is what myself and a few others thought when we walked in there trying to improve this thing in the year 2000. And we said, look, we can create a beautiful application for this. Of course, this was pre-mobile. We are talking about mobile apps. I hope you don't mind my example from 13 years ago, but the story is the same. It's just the technology is different. And they said, look, why don't we advertise this in the papers, get people to send in applications, and we'll try to develop something. To cut a long story short, the group of us built an application, and that application had so much value, that you could look at all the different combinations live. Right? I'm purchasing here, I'm over my limit for that blend, which can be $3.20. And the dollar is also fluctuating. It may have been 124 yesterday, it is 125 today. Right? All those things put into one application. And here in front of you, the person purchasing, in this case Peter, trying to beat the ceiling of his blend, has an absolutely wonderful, valuable application sitting in front of him. Right? So now they said, okay, fine, technically this sounds good, let's try this out. Of course, at the time, we didn't have fast internet, thanks to Professor Appa Singh's and Reshan's and others' efforts, that we have a superb infrastructure here, and I hope it can only get better. But at the time, so you couldn't really test out what we wanted in their offices and warehouses, because the objective was to do this in their offices and warehouses instead of coming to this auction and wasting 2 days of time. Right? People who were tasting and doing the prerequisites could then spend time doing other things, adding value to tea, branding the tea, selling the tea, packaging it, marketing it, and so on, right? So it was tested. Technically, it was more superior. You could sell more lots per minute than the human open cry system, but it was never implemented. It was not the cost. It was never the cost. It was the value, the perceived value of this technically superior application was just not there. Now, for instance, I remember at one point there was an elderly gentleman who was now physically using the application, looking at the combinations, trying to beat the ceiling to purchase that blend. He was one of the most, he continues to be the most respected big tea buyers, exporters of this country. So he's doing this thing, and he didn't like the keyboard as much at the time. And at one point he said, hey, there is no warmth in this, in the sense Normally he might want to say hello to the next door neighbor, did you have a beer last night, how many beers did you have last night, so on. So the guy who was on the podium trying to explain this and how it works, he said, Mr. Barrera, why don't you get a space heater? Because there was no warmth. So obviously the value there, the techie never understood. No, he was not talking about it was being cold. He was saying there was no warmth. This guy said, why don't you get a space heater? He was also being funny, but it didn't really add to the value that was being presented. So the point, finally, to reiterate, is that you as technical people will realize that here is a gold mine, a way in which you can innovate this, create efficiencies, improve the productivity of this entire industry, right? But the buyer out there, he is not as rational as you think he is in your programmed way of thinking. He is not doing exactly what you expect him to do as a rational human being, because he has other things that he is not costing into that value proposition. For instance, if I say it has so much value because he can save a day not coming to the auction, but what if he doesn't cost that day? No, it doesn't sound right, but that is the way people work. In one of my previous lives, I dabbled a little bit in market research, and I know what I'm talking about, right? Perceptions and cannot be generalized in a particular way. This is how one sees value. So to end, what I want to say is that unless there is value in the product or the process innovation that you put out to the market, from the point of view of the person who you are targeting it to, none of these brilliant things will be commercially successful. Right? There are so many amazing innovations that have lost money and all savings of people who have attempted to make this happen so that they can make the lives of the people better than they are. Right? That's a very sort of a good thing to achieve, but at the end of the day, that value proposition must be there from the buyer's point of view. So I am inviting you, the best of the best in the world, to take a look at the Colombo tea auction. There is a gold mine there. And if you can make it work here, and I'll answer Chitrangani's question, then you can hopefully make it in Kenya, in India, and in these other auctions that tea is sold. So think about it. If you need any consulting help, you can come to me. Thank you very much.
Actually, thank you very much, Dr. Harsha, for that wonderful and very fulfilling conversation, especially the keynote. And he also started it on a very warm note, ladies and gentlemen, tea. I hope you've had tea. I hope you started your morning. I can see some of you nodding your heads. We have a wonderful session ahead of us. Once again, thanking Dr. Harsha for his very valuable time. He's a very busy man, but he made it. And of course, made the start of the day, our final day, very eventful. Ladies and gentlemen, we're getting on to the first session today. Just as Dr. Harsha mentioned, it was on application. And now we are getting on to the app economy, the big view. I'd like to call on Mobile Money Colombo, Canada, Mr. Dinesh Sapamadhu, to take the stand.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Mobile Content Conference, Session 1. And we have a very good set of speakers. We have 4 eminent speakers who will be talking to you today about the app economy, the big view, To start the session, the first session will be by Gary Short, CEO for Impact Mobile. He will be speaking on mobile marketing. What works in US might also work elsewhere. Let me give you a quick background to Gary. Gary Short, who grew up in Central Africa, graduated from Columbia University and Stanford University. He was a columnist in Japan and produced international documentary programs on Asahi television. After working for UNICEF and World Bank on education, web development, and running a number of technology startups, Gary founded Impact Mobile in 2002. Over the past 9 years, Gary had played a leading role in mobile industry, running first cross-carrier short code campaigns in North America. He founded a mobile committee for Interactive Advertising Bureau in 2006 and published several books. In 2007, he helped to establish the Joint Task Force MMA, IAB, MRC for developing global, auditable, measurable standards. Over to Gary to take us.
Thank you. So I'm going to continue a little bit of Dr. Hasha's thread here, talking about what works. This is a picture of probably, 1955 America. I was just in Atlanta talking to Coke and Tom Daly about media. And media was so much simpler then, right? You had your Leave It to Beaver family all cuddled around one screen. They're all drinking Coke. You had, some second screening here on the newspaper, but things were fairly simple, right? And over time, things have become a lot more complicated. This, I don't know if you recognize this. This is just outside the papal quad, and everybody's waiting here for the announcement of Pope Benedict a number of years ago, about 8 years ago. And I've been in mobile a long time. This is, about 3 years after I started in mobile marketing. And here in the corner, you see one phone. And what is that phone doing? Any guesses? It's not taking a picture. It's texting. It's saying, Mom, I'm going to be really late for dinner, right? And then 8 years later with Francis, that's the same scene. Isn't that phenomenal? Isn't that phenomenal? And that's what I wanted to talk to you about today. And how we move from this economy to this economy and be relevant in marketing and reaching your consumer. And this is obviously the topic of the day, mobile, right? How do you move from that small little feature screen to this huge supercomputer? And I know I've talked to you about before the fact that it's such a fast supercomputer, right? 3,000 times faster than the computer that sent this guy to the moon. And so we tend to think of it as a supercomputer, right? And that is a big problem. Because really, it's very similar to that little feature phone in the corner, texting home to Mom. It's a relationship builder. And it's really not that much different to a device like this, right? So this device, right, is a $12 device, right? And it's dual SIM. It can sideload content. It's really, really effective at communication. And essentially, this supercomputer for a brand or a retailer, you look at it as something that, gosh, I got to build a super app to engage with my consumer. It's essentially 90% of what happens on this is what happened on this. SMS, communicating, saying I'm going to be late, for dinner tonight. And so you have a really big brain and an incy little usable part of it that you as a brand, a retailer, a business need to utilize to reach your customer effectively, right? And the problem is that we, as brands, retailers, businesses, we're on the wrong side of that screen, right? Everybody has it facing themselves. They create their own content. They're independent. They're agnostic. And we're on this side. And we have to become relevant. And that's one of the biggest problems in working out what works. Because we're sitting on this side, we're trying to create applications, as you had indicated, with no warmth, no relationship. So I want to take you back to this guy. I don't know if you remember him, but this is at the now defunct Comdex show in Vegas. I think it's around 2001. And he launched this thing, called a tablet. It became really popular, but not then. He thought it was really super cool. I think they distributed about 100,000 units before they shut it down. It took 2 quarters. Nobody bought it. Why? For the same reason the auction app didn't work, right? It wasn't the right application. It was an evolution, but the revolution happened here a few years later, not because of technology. There was no real technology here that was revolutionary. Actually, compacted touch, which was the pinch and zoom kind of stuff that made this so powerful. Compacted touch was actually invented in, 1999 by Andrew Su, right? Actually, the year before this, Prada launched a phone with LG, which was compacted touch, gorgeous design. It wouldn't have made a revolution. The revolution happened because this guy nailed the human element, the warmth, right? And allowed you to dive into data in a very intimate way. And it made people really excited about mobile, lining up around the block for new phones, jumping up and down when you got something. This is not somebody who's excited about technology. This is somebody who's excited about connecting to somebody else in a way which is intimate and warm, right? And I want to take you back a little bit further, if you don't mind, indulge me. This is from 1670. I collect maps. And this was a revolution. This was a revolution by John Ogilvy because he invented something called strip maps. He allowed you to get from one place, London, to Land's End, and instead of giving you a big map, he cuts it into sections and he put actually points of interest on it, right? This is no different from what we have today. It showed you distances, it showed you where to get a good meal, where to turn off, where to get a coffee. So now actually, if we look at a journey from Colombo down to Gaul, what's really changed? Nothing much. This is evolutionary, right? And you have points of interest, right? You can stop and see things along the way. And then when you're ready, you print it out, right? And really, if you're in your buggy in England in, 1670, with John Ogilvy's map, or you're in your roadster with your strip map, or you're in your stand driving down to Gaul with your printed out version from Google, but really not a huge difference. This is all evolutionary. This is the revolution. The revolution is the warmth in accessing data in a way which is an extension of what we are as humans, right? That's what works. This is a guy called Steve Mann. He's from Toronto. He's been working on eyewear for 25 years. He has patents up the kazoo, sells it to the literature. This is a prototype of Google Glass, which eventually ended up like that, right? And it's really amazing what you can do with this. I mean, it's phenomenal. Very exciting. This doesn't get people lining up in front of the stores. This doesn't get people jumping up and down. Why? Why is this something that's really cool that I may want to post, to Twitter or Facebook in my community and say, hey, look at that cool thing they're doing at Google, but there's no more. Because the guys at Google are techno guys. They look at technology first. Everything that works in mobile marketing, mobile engagement is not technology first. And so Fred was really excited about technology. And so was, Dick Tracy. We talked about technology for a long time. The idea of diving into gadgets and finding things, right? Here we have Samsung coming out with the same thing now. Wow. Super cool. Super cool. Right? But evolutionary, not revolutionary. Again, we talk about this all the time, the whole idea of taking data and moving it around. Every movie has that, right? Crunch some data into the floor and look at something and identify it with my fingers. It's really exciting. And Microsoft adopted this approach, right? So you have Xbox, huge a revolution in gaming in the home, and they try to take that now into the real world. Communicate with computers naturally, the warmth, right? But again, the Xbox really has been phenomenal in the home, and they want to make that their new hub. This is probably the only product they have going right now. But the bottom line is, can they expand that as the new interface? Don't know. And then, of course, you can go even further with mobile technology and technology generally, interfacing and making things an extension of yourself by embedding it in yourself. And there's no question at some point we will. Just as they are in certain movies like Total Recall. But we have, this is just amazing, 10 billion connected objects in the world. Right now, 10 billion. Forget about phones, cars, every single gadget that transmits sensor data. Pundits say that by 2020, this is set to rise 5-fold. Wow, it's huge. And this is the opportunity for revolution, right? Because we'll have plants that are transmitting data. We have diapers that are transmitting data, God bless them. We have, obviously, electricity, kilowatts, and then we have cars that will drive themselves and will be able to be more energy efficient, like the Recharge IT project by Google. And I want to sort of end things off talking about Sigmund here, because whenever I have a problem, I go to Sigmund. And he wrote a book called Civilization Discontents, which could be a mobile novel, right? And he talked about man has become a kind of prosthetic god. Because we put things on ourselves, and we did then and then. I mean, nothing's really changed. We drove cars. It's sort of like an extension of ourselves. And when he puts on all his auxiliary organs, he's truly magnificent. But those organs have not grown onto him naturally. And that's our biggest problem in mobile marketing. It's our biggest problem in mobile development and design, is they still give you much trouble at times. And in mobile, one interruption, you're gone. Any interruption of intent, you get precipitous drop-off in the ways that you can engage with that consumer. They don't have time for you. They've got a small screen and they're on their way. So when you put things in somebody's hand or on their face, that's not necessarily going to be a revolution. Because you may be interrupting what they bring naturally. The warmth. And so through the day, they have all these screens. What's happening, and this is the revolution, is the combination of screens. 1/3 of digital media spend is allocated cross-device. And people have increased their cross-device, connecting these sensors, these billions of sensors, 24% in the last year. Of those people that do cross-device campaigns, 75% see an increase in ROI. And that's, again, the business model. And so if this is with purchase as well. 2/3 of purchases are cross-media. In other words, I'm listening to radio, but I'm engaging with my phone. I'm purchasing on the phone while I'm listening to the radio. Attaching media, not thinking of things in a siloed fashion. This is the new revolution, guys. The new revolution is this, right? You may have seen this as my Velcro slide, okay? Is the digital Velcro. It's not focusing on content. It's focusing on connecting content. Not focusing on the next eyewear or something that you attach to your wrist to talk into, like Fred Flintstone. It's talking about connecting those things intelligently to create warmth and to create business models. Thank you very much.
That's insightful about marketing. Before I introduce the next speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Dinesh. Ladies and gentlemen, you know the formalities. You've been here for 4 days. Every time we have a keynote speaker, special guest, we like to herald them with a token of appreciation. So to do the honors, I'd like to invite Professor Apasinghe to join us on stage, as we'd like to give out a small token of appreciation to our keynote speaker today, Dr. Harsha De Silva. A little thank you for taking the time and coming to join us here at this very important event, the WSA. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause. Thank you very much to both our presenter and our keynote speaker. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the session continues.
Let me introduce our next speaker, Ms. Janine Horner. Janine Horner's best-selling books and videos about internet and mobile web designs have won her an international following and earned her speaking opportunities and consulting assignments around the world. She is the creator of digitalfamily.com, a full-service interactive design and training agency that offers web and mobile design, content strategy, and internet marketing services. Janine's skills as a techie translator helped her land her first book in 1996. Since then, she has written or co-authored more than 25 books on internet, including Website for Dummies, Mobile Web Design for Dummies, and every edition of Dreamweaver for Dummies. She is also a creator of more than 25 hours of training videos about web design and internet marketing. Over to Janine.
Every day, there are more computers with more content in more places than ever before. And all the content ever published will be available to us anywhere, anytime. It's a promise I've been hearing for more than a decade. Every movie, every newspaper article, every radio show, all of that content will be available wherever I am, wherever I go. Everything? Everywhere? Really? Still hasn't quite happened yet. Right? I live in Los Angeles, and because I have access to the beach, every once in a while I pull myself away from the computer, and I go down to the ocean, and I stare out at the waves, and I contemplate dilemmas like this. Content everywhere, all the time. Those are my feet, by the way. And one day I was sitting there watching the surfers, because in Los Angeles it's a really big deal. Everybody gets up early in the morning with their surfboard and goes surfing before work. And I was thinking, everywhere, content. Do you think someday, even on a surfboard, out in the middle of the ocean, you'd be able to be connected to the internet? How many people think that today, on a surfboard in the ocean, you could be connected to the internet? How many think they did it 5 years ago? True story. Now, I don't really believe that the internet's going to be so hyper-local that on a surfboard in the ocean, all of us will have computers. That was mostly a publicity stunt by Intel, but it was a good one. But I love using that because if it's possible to have the internet on a surfboard in the ocean, what else is possible? The internet is finally reaching this critical mass where local matters. When I started working on the internet in 1996, there just weren't enough people connected for us to have local applications. Local content wasn't relevant until we had the critical mass locally to have the audience we needed in a geographic region. So it's an evolution of the internet that has led to things like hyper-local news. And it's very exciting that as recently as this month in Chicago at a conference about hyper-local news, a third of the websites doing hyper-local news are now profitable in the US. So we were seeing this move toward local content having greater and greater value. There's a phrase that I know many of you know, SOLOMO, social local mobile. And I think if you want to think about what's going to work in local mobile applications, when you can bring together social, location-based, and mobile, you have a great opportunity. So one of my favorite apps, and I'm a total evangelist for Waze, I have nothing to do with them professionally, but I live in Los Angeles where traffic is terrible. So I love the idea of crowdsourced traffic information that can route me around traffic accidents as quickly as they happen, far more frequently than they should in Los Angeles. But I have to give a shout out to TrafficMate, those of you here in Sri Lanka. One of the winners in Abu Dhabi, the WSA Global event, was also a traffic app. So if you're in Sri Lanka, you might actually get better results from TrafficMate. But local content takes many forms. It can be journalistic, but it's really about informed communities. But Professor Brook brings me here to talk about design, because he knows that my passions are content and design, and how you present information in the way that's most useful to people. And so in Abu Dhabi, I spoke about responsive design. And 2013 is the year of responsive design. The idea is that you create one design that adapts, that responds to different screen sizes. And you use something called cascading style sheets to make it work. And I can get as technical as you want, and I'll talk to you more after this if you want. But the basic idea is presenting information, presenting content in the way that displays best on each device. Right? But there's a new design concept that I want to share today. The world is getting flat. No, I'm not saying that it's still not a globe spinning around the world. But there's a new design trend called flat design. And flat design is also an evolution of interface and of the internet. And iOS 7, when it launched recently, brought a lot of attention to this idea of flat design. But in fairness, Microsoft, with Windows 8, actually came out with this a little faster. And flat design, to really understand and to put it in context with this evolution of the internet, is about simplifying interface. It's about flattening the elements in the design. But to really understand that, I think it's helpful to step back and talk about skeuomorphism. Now, among my less educated friends in the US, they would say that's a $10 word. Skeuomorphism, I think it might actually be a $20 word, don't you think? But the idea of skeuomorphism is that you make something look like something it really isn't, right? So it's kind of, flat design is a cousin of minimalism, and skeuomorphism is this idea that we have to make something that's a button look like a button. That people won't know to push on something, even if it's really a click, unless it looks like a button. So skeuomorphism makes things that are virtual look like things in the real world, so that we understand the context. And if you look back historically, in the early days, in the mid-90s, this is about the year I started working on the internet, we were still trying to get our head around this idea of a desktop. And in the early days of Macintosh and Windows, they used the physical desktop as a metaphor to help us understand how to interact with information on a computer. And it was a very useful construct. It helped us understand how information was stored in this virtual world. But flat design represents an evolution in digital design. The concept of flat design is that we don't have to do that anymore. We can play to the strengths of the devices. We no longer have to use skeuomorphism to pretend that there's something they're not. Visual clarity, simplicity, honesty, nothing more than is actually needed in the design. No distractions. So you embrace the limits of the screen instead of trying to cover them up. So instead of making it look like a real calendar, you can use beautiful interface, touch, and the other elements we have today to make it more interactive. We get this crispness of design when we take away those 3D elements. We get to see things in a clearer way. We don't have to make things look three-dimensional anymore. The iBookstore doesn't have to look like a bookshelf. I don't buy books and put them on shelves anymore. I ran out of bookshelf space a long time ago. It's true, in my house I actually have a pile of books on the floor in the hallway because I have too many books. So I kind of love this evolution, even though I also love books. But if you look at this design, you see the iBookstore kind of hid the covers of those designs. It didn't actually display them as well as it could because it had to put this bookshelf around them. We don't need those bookshelves anymore. And so I'll leave you with this other winner from Abu Dhabi, iPolice, which is another great example of very local content, very local mobile content, and this idea that in Nigeria you could report crimes and problems in your neighborhood by simply using this application on your iPhone. And this way of empowering people who didn't have access to police very easily. And they do things like just providing the contact information of the police is revolutionary information there. But I spoke to Peter recently, who I met in Abu Dhabi, and they have a new option they just added. And I give them credit for flat design. You see that button, flat, no extra drop shadows and all that. But I love that they've added a panic button. Because the original idea of iPolice was that you could report crimes in your area, you could alert people to problems, and then he learned, because any good designer, any good application designer follows the lead of their users, asks them what they want next. And he learned that what people really wanted was to be able to get help for themselves. And so he added a panic button that will alert your emergency contacts or the local police if you're the one who's actually the victim of the crime. And I have to say, I kind of wish every application I ever got had a panic button. It'd be kind of handy, wouldn't it? You know, when you're frustrated and you're overwhelmed and there's so much stuff to learn and you're trying to keep up with everything, you could just hit panic. And all of the brilliant people in this room would come to my aid. I would love that. But I think instead I'll settle for going to the beach once in a while. And I'll leave you with this message. You are in a beautiful place with beautiful oceans. And you have gotten so much great information over the last few days at this conference. Make sure you take a little time before you leave to go stare at the ocean and think about what's the next big wave.
Thank you, Janine, for that. Interesting. I think we will use some of your flight designs during the panel discussion to discuss about how we can actually bring in some of these into our day-to-day life. Our next two speakers actually comes from Sri Lanka, and I have great honor in introducing the next speaker, Surain Pinto. Surain Pinto is the founder and CEO of WaveNet, a leading supplier of value-added services platform for telecommunication industry in Sri Lanka. And he is spearheading the global operations for customers and operations across Southeast Asia. A born entrepreneur, Surain led the WaveNet when he started WaveNet at the age of 19. And he founded the company and built it to a global company throughout his last years. WaveNet has a strong track record in innovation and customer satisfaction and continues to deliver excellence into the industry. And over to Surain.
Good morning, everybody. What I would like to talk to you about today is about fundamental ecosystems. Right? And mobile is obviously a very key area for us and what we do on a daily basis. We're very much in the mobile VAS space. And VAS is a very important thing when you, particularly from an emerging market and a Southeast Asian context, because this has been an engine of growth over the last so many years, 10 years or so. But there is a transition that's happening, and that transition is mobile VAS to mobile apps. And I thought it's very pertinent to address this because the industry is going through such radical change today that we, as businesses that are in this whole mobile VAS space, we need to deal with this, and we need to deal with this emphatically almost. So I thought it's very pertinent that that I am able to present to you today a view on this transition of mobile VAS to mobile apps. When you think of mobile VAS, basically we look at three areas, right? So we have communication, we have commerce and transactions, and we have infotainment. And most of the mobile VAS services have been in these three bundles. And all of these services are used every day and has been used every day by people. And the volume of traffic that goes through these services is actually quite huge. If you look at the ecosystem that was there, right, or the ecosystem that even exists today, you have the content owners, you have the aggregators or the technology enablers, then you have the mobile operators, and then you have the end users. Right? So the end user obviously pays for all these services, but then you go through the whole chain, ecosystem chain, where the mobile operator, the technology aggregator, and of course the content owner gets a share of that revenue. It's a very walled garden kind of approach. It has a strong emphasis on the carrier. So the carrier sponsors a lot of these services or drives a lot of these services. Therefore, they control the content, they control the provisioning, they control the delivery, and of course, they control the billing. Right? Technically, a lot of these services were driven also by carrier access technologies like SMS, MMS, USSD. So it was all very carrier-centric. Not surprisingly, the business model was also very carrier-centric, i.e., If you look at the revenue share splits that was happening in the market, the content owner would end up with about 10 to 15% sometimes. The technology aggregator or the technology enabler would end up with about 10 to 20%, and the carrier would keep 70 to 80%. Now this was justifiable because at the end of the day, you actually had to go through the mobile operator, and they had a large control over the infrastructure. So they justified the reason why they needed these kinds of revenue share splits. Also, to drive these services, it was very advertising heavy, right? Because service discovery was always a challenge. So it was always driven by advertising, above the line media. So therefore, the cost of delivering these services was actually quite high. If you look at the revenue landscape though, and this is the change that we see happening in the industry, actually mobile VAS, and this is from a global perspective, has been pretty flat, right, over the last few years. It's a big number when you look at the revenue figures, but actually there's the growth and the revenue curve for mobile VAS is pretty stagnant. It's a small but significant part of the operator's revenue pie. And for most operators today, it's become a defensive strategy of how to maintain these revenues and how to keep this share of their revenue going in an ecosystem that is fundamentally changing. So where do you look for growth in mobile VAS? Right? Globally, it's forecasted to grow at 10% up until 2018, and then they predict that it'll decline. The bulk of this growth is going to come from Asia Pacific, where we will see a growth of about 13%. And this is because of the personalization that is very popular in this part of the world. So culturally, we tend to be more attuned to personalization and having access to value-added services. The growth will also come from emerging markets, such as Africa and South America, where it's still very much in the growth phase for all these services. Mature markets are already in decline, right? So in Europe, it's expected that mobile VAS revenues will actually decline by about 7% from 2013 onwards. And Africa is set to overtake Europe and North America in revenue terms by 2050. So the landscape is very varied. So there's growth, obviously. There's still opportunity, but there's also a very, very compelling trend. And that trend is that you will peak and you will drop off. So as VAS companies, or as companies that are in the VAS space, and anybody in this ecosystem, so the operator, the technology enabler, obviously we are confronted with, and we need to deal with this question of, okay, so there's change happening, how do we adapt? Right? And we need to adapt, because if we don't, I think the numbers will tell you a story that you will not survive. So if you look at mobile apps, and if that was a view of mobile VAS, then if you look at mobile apps, what do you see? It's basically fueled, the rise of mobile apps is actually fueled by the growth or the penetration of smartphones. And if you look, this is a report by Nielsen. If you look, they've identified 3 types of devices or handsets that we use today. That's a smartphone, the multimedia phone, and the feature phone. Right? And the countries, I'm not sure if you can see that, but you can see the small penetration is India and Brazil. I can't see that myself. But if you look at most of the other countries, you can see the smartphone penetration is reaching some serious numbers, right? And this trend is continuing. The growth of smartphones is inevitable. The sub-$100 handsets are going to push. What is defined by smartphone is a device that has a operating system, a smart operating system. So Android coming into the sub-$100 category is fueling the growth of smartphones even in the emerging markets, where penetration will go past double digits and will go into the 20-30% over the next 2 to 3 years. So that the rise of mobile or smartphones is basically boosting this whole growth of the app economy and the app ecosystem, which obviously is going to affect the mobile VAS ecosystem. If you look at this, these numbers are staggering. Right? So downloads are predicted to go to 102 billion in 2013, which is about a 60% rise from 2012. Right? Now revenue is going to hit $26 billion in 2013, which is up 44.5%, which basically means that at a global level, app revenue is now greater than mobile VAS revenue globally. Right? And that's mobile app revenue is forecasted to increase by 17% CAGR annually for the next up to 2018. So when you look at this picture, what you see is while there are pockets of growth in places like Africa for mobile VAS, I think it's pretty evident that apps are going to substitute, and apps are a very good substitute for mobile VAS. If you look at application usage, again, you can see application usage is, if you own a smartphone, your use of applications is quite high. So most people still, it's true that most people still use even though they're using a smartphone, they still use their smartphone for texting. But actually, if you look at the usage of applications, it's actually quite high. And this is the key. There's a new ecosystem and a new business model that's come into place. There's a content application owner, there's the app ecosystem, and there's the end user. And the revenue share splits between those two are actually more equitable to the application owner than in the previous model, where they would have got maybe 10-20% at the most. Right? No operator control, so the operator loses, you cut out the middleman, so to speak. You also have the advantage of accessing global markets. Right? So when I'm in the app economy, I can develop an app once and I can address the global economy. I can address the global market. Right? Whereas if I was in the vast mobile ecosystem, I had to go to each carrier, I had to integrate with their infrastructure, I had to go through this whole cycle of testing and development before I could even launch my service. Today I don't need to do that. I can build an app, I can launch it on an app store, and I can reach a global audience, which I couldn't do in the early ecosystem. So apps will cannibalize mobile VAS. I think that's an established fact as far as I'm concerned. I mentioned the growth for the next few years. And apps solve this problem. So we have technology limitations, we have wide market reach, we have more efficient delivery. Basically, we don't need to integrate with operators. And it's all obviously cheaper because service discovery is not as expensive. We don't need above-the-line advertising, etc. to reach our target audience. Outside of the mobile VAS business, models will be better. And as VAS companies, I think what we need to do is we need to reevaluate our position in the value chain. So for us, if you look at where we are in the ecosystem, being a technology enabler is simply not an option anymore. We really need to reevaluate where we are in the whole ecosystem. The challenge, however, and this is what I'd like to finish off with, is that it's a jungle out there. The ability to differentiate yourself in the app ecosystem is not as simple as solving a technological problem. And I think it boils down to the point made earlier by our keynote speaker. It's warmth and heart. What you'll win only when you have that warmth and heart. From a previous perspective, from a mobile VAS perspective, it was almost we were in a position of technical challenge, delivering solving complex problems. Now it's all about the heart. And that fundamental mindset shift, I think, is what's necessary for to fuel the next growth in this particular industry for us. Thank you very much.
The last speaker, before we start the panel, is Harsha Purasinghe. Harsha is a serial entrepreneur who founded 3 software companies. Harsha founded Microimage in 1993 at the age of 19 while he was at college with some of his college mates. Today, Microimage is considered the most successful college startup story in the ICT industry in Sri Lanka. In 2013, Harsha founded WSO2 Mobile to build a suite of lean enterprise middleware to solve enterprise mobility challenge. This was incorporated as a fully owned subsidiary of WSO2 Inc., a leading open source middleware company. I'd like to invite Harsha to talk on the subject of enterprise mobility. Over to you.
Good morning, everyone. I hope all the delegates are receiving the warm hospitality of Sri Lankans and had a great time with the conference so far. I would like to answer my good friend Harsha before I kick off the presentation. I think you started to build something when the technology was evolutionary. And it was the previous generation. If you really look at today's context, it's the new generation who are entering into the stockbrokering houses, and also the technology is now revolutionary. They will be carrying this technology. I think this is the right time to revolutionize that place. So with that, I would like to say I'm actually in between flights. Somehow Chitrangani managed to pull me into this event. Last week I was in Dubai because the GITEX technology conference was happening there. And it was really interesting over there. You know, the ruler of Dubai, Sheikh Mohammed, has given a directive. Within 2 years, all the government officers and the enterprises in the United Emirati of Dubai has to be mobile enabled. So when something comes from a ruler like that, everybody panic and rushing, you know. So when I spoke to some of the government officials, they said we have to mobile enable and launch mobile apps, otherwise we are going to lose our jobs. I thought they are going to say the opposite, like their heads will be chopped, but they said we are going to pretty much lose our jobs. So there's a sudden rush to mobilize the government services, and also the enterprises are also moving towards building apps and give experience to all these citizens. So what I would like to do today is to give a perspective on the emergence of the mobile enterprise app economy. But I would like to start with this interesting picture, but I will not spend much more time on this. This is exactly how the world looks like 10 years ago. Actually, Suren gave a very interesting perspective, how difficult it was to build apps and take the products into the market when the whole ecosystem was pretty much dominated by mobile operators. And also with the form factors and the other dynamics involved at that time, it was very difficult era to build serious enterprise mobility applications. Then came this interesting device, which became the hero of the enterprise, and pretty much became a revolution in the enterprise space. And it became so popular for the email application, but slowly most of the organizations start using workflow applications to deliver interesting services to their staff merely. So what happened? I mean, this was like the hero of that era. Then came the real disruptors, the game changers, I would say, Apple and Android, and disrupted the whole market space. For me, actually, there were three interesting things happened within the last 5 years. First of all, it was the iPhone and advent of the whole ecosystem for apps. It's not only about the iPhone, it's the whole ecosystem which Apple introduced, which pretty much Android took mass market. Then the other interesting thing, the revolutionary device, the iPad. Bill Gates wanted to do this 10 years ago, as Gary shared earlier, but he couldn't succeed. But when iPad was introduced in 2010, it became a phenomenal success. Now, with this emergence of these devices and the ecosystem, what we have seen is the early in the early stage, what we saw is a new app economy emerging. But all these apps were consumer-centric, built for various consumer use. But if you really look at today, there are more than 1 billion apps combined in both iTunes and Play Store together. More than 1 billion apps. As Suresh very well highlighted, it's a jungle out there. It's really, really difficult to find apps. And if you are building apps, I know there are a lot of entrepreneurs here, a lot of creative people here. It's very difficult to make money out of building consumer-centric mobile apps. But what we have seen within the last few years is enterprises moving towards mobilizing their processes. It starts with simple things like email and calendar, giving the field force application for field force automation, travel and expense claim on the go, things like this, very interesting applications. Now, the other interesting things happening in the enterprise is IT is losing control. IT is very famous to keep control over affairs, command and control all the affairs, but they are losing it because all the customers, partners, suppliers around the enterprise now have access to these smart mobile devices and gadgets. And all these application initiatives are not IT-centric most of the time. For example, marketing department decides we are going to build a CRM app. We don't need to ask IT, we are going to build our own CRM app and give it to our staff to use. Likewise, there are pockets of applications emerging where IT is aware. So IT go pretty much crazy because it's a slightly complicated ecosystem. On one side, you have your enterprise systems, you have your ERPs, supply chain systems, legacy systems, business intelligence systems, cloud applications. There's a lot of cloud applications which enterprises consume today. On the other side, you have the leading smartphone platforms. You have the Apple and iOS ecosystem, Android. Of course, BlackBerry and Windows Mobile are 5% of the whole share, but you never know. With Microsoft's acquisition, they can always bounce back. So in the middle, IT guys go crazy because it's not easy to get command and control like they used to do. So there are some interesting things happening around. One thing is explosion of APIs. So API is going to be the significant driver for mobile app development for the enterprise. It's going to be APIs. It's going to be an API-centric enterprise world that we are going to see in the future. So to connect to all these backend systems, cloud services, all that, there's a new API economy emerging. With that, there will be opportunity for developers to build lots of applications. The next thing is enterprise app development. So in the first wave of consumer apps, people build apps using native tools. People build native applications for the respective native platform. It could be iOS, it could be Android. But in the enterprise world, it's costly affair to build native applications. So there's a lot of focus towards HTML5 and hybrid approach. Basically, you have your single business logic consistently across all the platforms, and you have native capability to access the respective device features, like accessing the camera, maybe accessing the GPS, for instance, for a field force automation. So Gartner predicts in another 4 or 5 years' time, the enterprise world will move towards hybrid application development. So this is the application development aspect. The next aspect is the emergence of enterprise app stores. Because when you build an app for yourself or your enterprise, it doesn't make sense to put that app in the iTunes store or the Google Play Store. Lots of enterprises struggle to distribute their iPad, iPhone applications because they always think it has to go into that store. And I mean, like, you go and put your, let's say there's a leading conglomerate here, they build an application for their field force staff. Right now, they go and put it in the public store to distribute. But with emergence of enterprise app stores, you don't need to do that. Enterprises will have the same consumer app experience within their limits. That means they will give access to their employees, suppliers, customers, and partners. But same experience. So Gartner predicts 25% of the enterprises globally will adopt an enterprise app store within the next 3 years. So finally, I would like to share this slide. The world is moving towards a mobile-first enterprise. After seeing and experiencing what I heard in the Gulf, I see not only the enterprise, even the governments are moving to a mobile-first government. So it's going to be a mobile-first government, it's going to be a mobile-first enterprise. So all the creative people out there, entrepreneurs, app developers, there's tremendous amount of opportunity, there's lots of value to take out of this new emerging app economy in the enterprise. So I would like to welcome all of you to explore this paradigm shift and grab a piece of action. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Harsha, for talking about enterprise app stores. Now we have a couple of minutes for a panel discussion, and I'd like to invite Gary, Janine, Suren, and Harsha to come over to the stage so we can start the panel. The format of the panel discussion will be pretty much that you can ask questions, during the session. To get it going, let me ask the first question so that we get the audience warmed up. Gary, you saw, I think we spoke about it just before the start of the session, that over-the-top app stores as well as what you call the true app stores. And Harsha spoke at the end about the enterprise app stores. So maybe what's your opinion or what you see it's moving into the next couple of years, how these app stores will get developed?
I couldn't agree. Is this on? Okay. I couldn't agree more with the last presentation. I think that the tremendous problem we have is the nomenclature. So we talk about apps, and we talk about the new app economy as if everything has to be in the way that Apple sort of laid it out. So that there's an SDK, we build this SDK, we dump our stuff into an app store, and Apple sells our services based on aggregate content to make money on hardware. I think that the future of app development isn't so simplistic. It isn't just selling, it isn't just developing, app developers globally in garages with an Apple SDK and Apple making money on that. I think it's a much more sophisticated ecosystem that's emerging that was very profoundly articulated in the last presentation. And I think that we're moving to a market where there is no clear-cut OTT or what I call TTM, through the middle sort of business. I think that obviously apps are moving, I think, into a more sort of centralized window, which we can call a browser, and sort of API-driven. I don't think we'll ever get back, unfortunately, to the carriers playing a significant role anymore. I think that boat's sailed. I think that the challenge is that we're moving to really what it used to be in many ways on the internet, where you had a browser and you had your ISPs, and that's where the content will be held. I believe we'll move into an HTML-centric environment and definitely API-focused. So the OTT economy will continue to burgeon, and the challenge is it isn't just OTT over the carriers. People will continually OTT over OTTs. You're continually trying to one-up the business model. But it's a very vibrant economy, and I just would challenge everybody to forget what your perception of mobile apps are in the old school sort of Apple context, and think about applications in a much more holistic sense, cross-screen, and much more intelligent, engines that can make money for the economy.
Harsha, you want to say something on that? How the whole discovery and the delivery is going to be, I think, like we said, now we have over billions of applications. How do people discover them? How do you find it? How do you start using them? Okay, why don't you answer that?
So, you're referring to the consumer space or the enterprise space?
Both now, right? I mean, we are moving from a consumer right now, what Gary was talking about.
Yeah, so the consumer space, of course, it's, the problem in the consumer space is the app stores are pretty much controlled by the big guys. So, there's nothing much the entire user community can do about it. They can't go and try to put policies, predictive analysis, like interesting analytics, location, context awareness, to give specific, intelligent positioning and of the apps which are relevant to the user. So that's something that has to emerge from the guys at Apple as well as the Android. But they are doing a lot about that, because if they wanted to be successful and keep this whole consumer app economy growing, they have to bring innovation in that space. But on the other side, in the enterprise space, of course, since it's it'll be like the interesting thing is, in the enterprise space, a new division will emerge. The IT will, with the mobile enterprise, what will happen is there will be a new mobile center of excellence emerging in the enterprise. the IT will lose that control. And this mobile center of excellence will have people coming from all the other business divisions. So collectively, they have the ability to come up with the best experience to all the partners, suppliers, customers, and the employees. So they can bring the rules which are needed. They can tie them into the policies. They can deliver specific content to specific people. So the enterprise space is very interesting. There's a lot of control, but the point is, it's not. If IT try to do it, it's going to pretty much fail. It has to be a new division which has to emerge, who understand the mobility ecosystem, and they need to work with IT and all the other stakeholders of the organization to give this delivery experience.
Correct. Okay. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Go ahead.
I was going to offer a consumer example of how people are dealing with the mobile app versus native app and how you get discovered. I had a conversation recently with somebody who works at Hulu, and they distribute television content from major producers around the world. And because of digital rights management, a lot of their content has to be native apps because they have to protect it, and contractually they're required to make it native apps. But they recognized that having mobile web apps that were searchable by Google made them more discoverable. So they came up with a hybrid approach. And what they're doing is they take all of the trailers, all of the free content from those TV shows, they put those in mobile HTML5 apps searchable by Google. When people find those, then they lead them to the application store to find their application of the full shows. So I think we're seeing an evolution from native to web apps and some very interesting experiments in the meantime where people are trying to see both advantages.
Exactly. So the discovery is actually the key. How do you really discover it?
One of the keys.
The big challenge is that I don't think with enterprise you've learned a lot when you're looking back at the consumer section. You're saying how can we do this, and obviously it's mobile first, and also you're creating something that you know and you control the architecture. The problem is I don't believe we've been set back so significantly by Apple that I don't think we can dig ourselves out of this hole. Initially, Apple was evangelist and changed a lot of the business models because they said, hey, we're going over the top of the carriers, and we went, yay, okay? That was great. However, the reality now is we need to go OTT on Apple, and we can't because they have a construct that everybody's adopted, which is I find content, I download this heavy application onto my desktop, and that sits there as my bookmark, and I lose it in some folder somewhere, and I never go back. The reality is that if ultimately things have to go to HTML5 in the browser, and you want to then bookmark it, what should happen is that bookmark should be the app. And I know you can do that. But the problem is that the consumer is so trained to go to the app store that they lose the fact that really everything could be designed elegantly in a browser, find it, and then download it with the attributes and content that you need to make it seamless as a sort of a hybrid, native HTML5. And I think that's a challenge, and I think we're going to be stuck with that legacy for many years.
I think we have a question there.
Thank you. I think that this question can be for all of you, but I'm thinking about the mobile applications in the enterprises. And I've been working with large enterprises in my past work, and I found it difficult to try to explain to customers that this is the way you need to go, that you really need to enable the applications also in the mobile phones. And for your customers, not only for your customers, but also for your working force, because we were doing an application that also was used internally in the enterprise. So my question is that how to make customers aware. If they are not aware in Finland, I believe that they are not aware in many other places too. So how can you sell the idea of having enterprise mobile to your customer?
Just to clarify, you're asking how does the company promote it on the enterprise applications?
No, I'm trying to, for example, if you are doing tailor-made applications for your customer, and you are trying to convince them that we have to have this in mobile too, that we have to harmonize the application to work in all of the devices. That's what I'm asking. I think that Panush might have some.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So the thing is, you wanted to build an app and take it to your customers globally without going to the app stores, right? So I think the best way to promote that is one thing, of course, it depends on the app. If it is like a hybrid HTML5 app, you can promote it through your website. You don't need to, you don't say that you don't have an enterprise app store. You can just promote it through your global website and distribute that app globally. That's the best way. I mean, like the other option is, of course, if you have a consumer-centric application. If it is employee-centric, it's very easy. It's within yourself. If it's partner-centric, that's also easy because you know your partners, you can direct to them. But if you are a large retailer, a global company, taking app to the entire global community across different geographies, of course, right now, if you have your enterprise app store, then you have to link your enterprise app store to your global website. That's one way of doing it. The other way is, of course, you have to distribute it to the traditional public web stores. Or you have the opportunity of building HTML5 based modern app and distribute it over the web, which people will discover.
Okay, but what if the application or the project is tailor-made so that your customer is being the only customer that is using the application, and they want it to be on the their own application, and then you have to convince them to make it mobile? How would you do that?
I'm a mobile marketer. As a mobile marketer, I am struggling to find reliable sources of information when it comes to expanding my knowledge about mobile marketing. Now, I mean, what I see in the current context is that now there is web strategy for a given product, and mobile strategy is an optional part of that. Now, when it comes to mobile first, right? When create a mobile product, there should be a mobile marketing strategy, and for mobile marketing to be evolved as an academic discipline. Right? I don't know whether they exist there. I mean, whether it already exists. But my question is, what are the sources that are already there, and what may be coming up in that academic context?
It's a big question, right? The big thing that I would like to leave with you is that this word academic, I think you used, is try to avoid that at all costs. I mean, there's an opportunity to do tremendous things with brands and retailers, and the secret to success is not to think of mobile as another vertical silo. And the challenge is that the brands think of, they've got media buying agencies, and then they have creative agencies, and they have digital agencies, and they have, all these different components that are very vertically driven. And so the opportunity for you is to create a horizontal strategy for them. Because mobile first means that your consumer is interacting with all those different touch points throughout the day. And so your strategy is to basically world domination. You go in there and create a strategy which intersects with their media buying, their digital, legacy legacy web strategy, their in-store strategy of their retailer, end cap, POS. You create a path to purchase, which is going to be more valuable to them than any legacy, incumbent strategy that they have, because you're going to be the one who gets their consumer to buy their product, which at the end of the day goes far beyond their traditional, hey, let's advertise on primetime TV and leave it to be the 1955.
I would just second that by saying that I think several years ago people started looking at mobile as this other thing, and part of responsive design and the whole evolution of all of these technologies is starting to realize that we have to design for everything, we have to market across everything, whether that's a giant screen that fills the wall or a little tiny one that sits on my wrist. It's really about the consumer relationship and following that consumer everywhere they go. So mobile is key, and mobile marketing is a hot area, but I think as things evolve, it will just become one of many ways that we reach people, and the best agencies are being very holistic in their approach.
But it's all about relationship building and creating that relationship with the customer horizontal.
So we'll take one more question, because I think there's a lot of hands, but I think what we can do, the panelists will be here after the session, and please talk to them. I think we are almost half an hour. Last question.
I'm Alex from Hong Kong, and my question is for Gary. What do you think about, in the coming 3 years, okay, we are talking about mobile apps. What format of mobile apps or what type of device we will use in terms of next 3 years, not now?
In the next 3 years? Well, your guess is as good as mine, and things are changing so rapidly. I think that the personalization of the screen is going to become more and more profound. The OEMs are not dictating as much the screen size as the consumer. And I think Samsung has been a great proponent in customizing screens for the consumer experience. And so, from a Note-type environment through to Apple has been customizing their screens for their developers, because their business model is get the developers happy so they can develop content. That content will sell my phone. And so they try to make it as simple as possible. We have one size, and then they came out with tablet. 2 sizes. Samsung is agnostic. Samsung develops for the consumer appetite. And so I think that, in a world, as I indicated, we have 10 million sensors, 10 billion sensors out there, and that's going to 50 billion. I think you need to think of how does that consumer interface with those sensors? And it's either going to be machine to machine, or it's going to be through a screen. And that screen will vary ultimately depending on the appetite of the consumer to digest that. If I'm on a surfboard, I'll have an interface to what I will when I'm doing couch commerce at home. And so I will have multiple screens which fit into the way that I interact with my environment. And the smart OEMs will develop for those niche groups, and then you will have to develop content which, again, can be digested and is not just responsive design, but is targeted for that moment in time. If I'm on a surfboard, I don't want my website just compressed to render on my screen. I want it to give me the information I need at this time, which may be very different from what I need on the couch. So that's essentially the battle we'll have. The screen size, device size, experience will come first. Experience first, and content and technology will meet the consumer at that given moment in time.
If I can add one point to that, there's a very interesting video you can watch it on YouTube. It's called A Haven Glass, and it's a video by Corning, which is a company that makes all the Gorilla Glass screens for handsets and tablets and stuff. If you watch that, everything you see becomes a potential touch point for content or accessing the internet. So it starts with you wake up in the morning, you go to the toilet, and even the mirror, the TV screen comes up on the mirror. You watch the news. You walk to your kitchen table, and the kitchen tabletop is also a screen, and you can read your emails while you cook your breakfast. And it's actually an amazing video. So if you just go into YouTube and just type "A Day with Glass," you can find it. It's an amazing video to watch. It will help you understand the future of interaction with devices.
And screens are not, I just give one example. In Asia, McDonald's put together a program which illustrates how screens can be used. They just put NFC sensors under their tables in their restaurants. And they basically created a racetrack for kids. If you use an NFC phone, it turns into a car. And you basically can play on the table. That table now becomes a screen. It's not a screen, but because of the little device you have, it becomes a super huge surface that you could never afford as McDonald's to create a screen that size. But now your plastic table with a few, pennies for the NFC chips and an application creates a very sophisticated racetrack on every table in a McDonald's store. That is the future.
So with screens in your toilet, I think we will close these sessions for this exciting session on app economy. I think all the panelists will be here for a little while. I know there were so many hands and been raised and asked questions. So on behalf of WSA, I'd like to thank Suren, Harsha, Gary, and Janine to being here this morning and taking your valuable time and talking with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Dinesh, for the moderation. And then can I have all the panelists to remain on stage just for token of appreciation? So may I invite Honorable Harsha D. Silva, Member of Parliament to come on stage to deliver give away the tokens of appreciation to be given the token. I don't think that I need 2 photos from us. So to Gary Schwartz. And to Suren Pinto. And Arthur Rosina. Thank you very much for the first and all the moderator and the panelists. Thank you very much for your contribution.
Good. I want to thank the speakers this morning, especially for the kind of tour de force they have given us through the mobile space. The tour de force, which is one of seeing actually that mobile has penetrated everything which we are actually doing, everything in terms of the normal activities of everyday life, the work, the marketing. We will come to the learning later on, but now we will deal with the issues regarding what it is actually doing to governments and also to public administrations. And that is something where we basically see different speeds. On the one hand, we see the high speed of technology and the high speed of the marketplace, and on the other hand, we see the very different speed of government. I'm very privileged to have 4 people here to join me on the stage here. First, I'm asking the governor of the state of Osun from Nigeria, Okpebholo Adesole Arekpesola. Please come and join me here on the stage. Then we have from Hong Kong, the member of the Legislative Council from the Special Administrative Region in China, the Honorable Elizabeth Kwan. Then we have from Southeastern Europe, the person who is directing there, the European Software Institute Center in Bulgaria, Dr. George Sarkov. And finally, we have the program head for e-services and re-engineering government programs here in Sri Lanka, Kachana Tudureka. We will not have speeches, but we will have discussion following what we have heard earlier this morning. The key issue here is what do we do in terms of, on the government side, what is being done on the government side in terms of entering into this mobile space. Governor, first, your little intervention, please.
Greetings to everybody here. It's nice to share the warmth of Sri Lanka with most of us. First of all, the information technology innovation worldwide is stimulating and quite useful to partially everybody. To my government, we have applied technology to improve our efficiency as a government and prevent corruption and stop leakages. And I will start with revenue generation. Since government is essentially about efficient utilization of resources of the state, you can't talk of efficient utilization if you cannot garner the revenue, if you cannot mobilize the revenue. Mobilizing the revenue, therefore, is essential to government. Technology has been deployed by us to improve our efficiency in revenue generation through blocking leakages that are usually sources of loss to government. From application of point of sales terminals and linking this with all the banks collecting and all the banks in which we deposit our money, we have reduced to a large extent losses to government because you have real-time monitoring of collections as well as warehousing of those collections. The revenue base of the state before the advent of my administration was about $2 million per month. This we have increased to $10 million per month. And if you need to know the historical context to appreciate what we are doing. The $2 million collection per month was almost the maximum the state could get for over 20 years, for close to 20 years. In 3 years, through application of technology, we have improved the collection to what I just said, about $10 million, just in 3 years. As against what was the case for 20 years. Through the automation of payroll system, we have eliminated the racket that was in this payment of salaries and wages. And these are saved the state enormous sum of money because we stopped payment of wages or salaries to those who had no business being in the system by application of technology, mobile technology essentially. I must not fail to define that the market in our case is the people, those that elected us into office and must serve. So, as against talking of the market of commercial people, my market is my electorate, is the people. Again, technology has helped us to do an interesting thing. We feed pupils in elementary school, about 300,000 of them, to be sure that nobody takes advantage of government. We deploy technology to ensure that only the students, 300,000 of them, that are to be fed are fed, and nobody exploits the system to their advantage. So, through point of sale terminals, mobile technology, we ensure that only the pupils through their biometrics that are registered are fed, and the vendors too are equally paid by the number of patrons that they have, pupils that patronage are paid for by the banks. So the government is insulated from any manual manipulation of the process. And this equally saves government money that could have gone into corruption by ensuring transparency in the process. The chief, the most significant of all our application of technology is in reducing the cost of providing books to our students. We deal with about 150,000 students in high school. We operate a free education system. What that means is that we provide free books to our students, particularly in the high grade. All of them, but the concern now is about students in the high grade. That's students in high school, 150,000 of them. Well, we to provide 3 textbooks to all these students in the high grade, 150,000 of them. The cost for us would be $50 million. There was no way we could afford that. Just no way. It was just simply impossible. Realizing the practical impossibility of providing the requisite number of textbooks for our students in high school, considering our resources, we felt that we could use already existing technology in an iPad tablet to reduce the cost of this, and we applied, we adapted an already existing technology to ensuring that virtual textbooks, including virtual learning and complete uploading of all questions arising from your contact with the books, questions of previous examinations, 10-year collection of examinations, of terminal, final year examinations for students at that level, are all put in the iPad tablet and given to students at a price that, one, the state will afford and free of charge to the pupils. These 4 areas I mentioned are our own application of mobile technology to enhance the efficiency of government in revenue collection, prevention of corruption, ensuring transparency, and reducing the cost of free education to a large number of our students. This, to me, has been a wonderful contribution of technology to governance in my state. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I recall when WSA started off, one of the first winners were government applications from Romania and Bulgaria, creating exactly that kind of transparency, elimination of corruption, and also efficiency in government. One of the leaders in that direction is obviously Hong Kong. Elizabeth, do you want to give us a little bit of an update where you are traveling now in terms of the Hong Kong government and the Hong Kong experience?
Thank you very much. Hong Kong is in a quite slightly different situation. Corruption in Hong Kong is not a problem because all the government information, including budget, finance, everything, are totally transparent to our citizens. I think when we're talking about government as a facilitator for driving mobile application or mobile business in the future, Hong Kong government is creating or developing different kind of measure to create the right infrastructure, environment, skills, and culture for facilitation of the development of mobile applications for usage in Hong Kong. I think there's a lot of things that we have done in the past, like 15 years. The first thing is about infrastructure. Infrastructure of Hong Kong, we have very high accessibility. Mobile penetration over 228%. Household broadband penetration is 86% of the figures. But we are still working on more mobile facilitation, like Wi-Fi hotspot. We have now around the whole Hong Kong about 20,000 wireless hotspot. I think maybe it should be the highest in APAC, but still there's a lot of public area around the street. If tourists walk into the Hong Kong street, you might want to use Wi-Fi around Hong Kong shopping area or somewhere just around the street, but not in a Starbucks or in a McDonald's. So we are still working very hard on that. In order to do that, because it's involved public facilities, so we need the government to facilitate the operator in order to do that. I think another very important infrastructure is legal framework. In order to support the movement of further digital cities environment, we need very good digital legal framework too. So in year 2000, we have acquired electronic record and signature, the same legal status as paper-based counterpart. So we support the transaction. But we are still working on something else. It's about privacy ordinance. In Hong Kong, we have privacy ordinance, a guide about the personal data and personal information to be used on the internet also. But still because it's moving too fast. And there's a lot of personal data and personal information now around on the internet or in mobile apps that may not be protected well by the present legal framework. So we are still working on that. For environment, for the past 2 years, Internet Professional Association of Hong Kong, we are pushing the government to open up public sector information. That means all the information from public sector to transfer that into machine-readable formats. So, all the app producer can use those public sector information free and use it to develop as more friendly, user-friendly application for citizens to use. I think that is very important because there are a lot of data in the government archive, but it's not readable. And for citizens to get the information is quite difficult. And also, we keep on thinking about what our citizens want. I think in the future, we want our personal information accessed through our mobile device. For example, your personal health records. So we are working on the local government, we are working on the e-health record system at the moment. Now the records can be shared with within all public hospitals. Over 85% of our citizens' health records are already online. But the health records still cannot share between private clinic and government hospital. Our vision is one day, if I travel as a Hong Kong citizen, I travel to China, Beijing, or to Sri Lanka, if I suddenly have a fever or I don't feel good, I need to go to the hospital. I can recall my health record, what allergic I have, what kind of treatment I had before, and then I can show to the doctor to save my life immediately. So, but that is something still not happened yet. That we are still working on. About the skill and culture, we are working on narrowing the digital divide for the last 30 years. And we are still working on it. Government can support in many ways. For example, the promotion of web accessibility, and also the promotion of the development of R&D in assistive technology. And that is something that we are working on.
Thank you. One of the things which are really interesting in terms of what the governor says and what you say is links back to when World Summit of World Grand Jury was in Estonia. Because there is a great difference when you come to health records or student records or government efficiency, from which side you approach it. And Estonia has been within the European Union a leader to take the view that the citizen owns his or her own data. And it's not the administration, it's not the doctor, it's not the school, it's not the tax office, and it's not the police. And that the citizen has to have, and that is something which is very interesting, which is implemented in Estonia, that the citizen has a record of which government agency has accessed which information which belongs to the citizen. And that transparency is something which is very interesting, because when we design, and when our health record systems designed around the world, is it actually the health insurance which owns the data? Is it the hospital which owns the data? Is the doctor? Is the radiologist? It's, you know, the people who are actually operating the machines? Or is it actually given to the citizen? So what you were seeing, Elizabeth, is very interesting. You say, you imply that by having the data on your device, you are actually also the owner of it. Have you moved actually already to that point where you make transparent who is actually accessing the data so that you get also that kind of information? Do you want to answer that?
We are working towards having this is using evolutions. The evolutions before the GitHub record was owned by the public hospital, that means the government. But now we are moving towards by developing the new GitHub record system. We are moving towards to let all the citizens own their own data. We are on that way.
Okay, very good. Let's go to Bulgaria and to George Sakov. George, you are not only a professor and a researcher, but also a consultant to many different governments. You have done also a lot of projects within Southeastern Europe, in the region. Give us a short update of how mobile actually is now being deployed within the region and what are the transformative effects the governor has talked about. For instance, really raising, multiplying 5 times the revenue base of the government and the public administration, at the same time as being able to use these resources to provide school books for free on tablets to all the students. Give us examples from your region, please.
Thank you, Peter. Well, actually, one of the examples I wanted to give was not from the region, it was exactly a Estonian example about the transparency in the mobile. So, actually, I will give some good examples, but I will try and I want to share some bad examples as well, or some issues, because being a pioneer in some areas immediately gives you the curse of having the first failures in that, or experience the first problems. And those who know me, you know in particular that my subject of interest is the security, and Elizabeth touched already about that. And before sharing these examples and answering directly the question of Peter, or the topic he suggested, let me just ask you one thing. Those of you who were on the welcome dinner in the parliament, most of you were there, yes? And we have to leave our electronic devices here. Could you please raise your hand, at least, well, if you haven't attempted to find your device cautiously during that dinner? Anyone? You didn't try. Anyone else? You didn't try. All others? Okay, a couple of people, not dependent. Okay. Me personally, I tried at least 5 times at least to show Madam some pictures, to tweet, to check my mails, well, unfortunately not to check the e-government service yet. That's critical to me. But in most of the cases, like in the Estonian case, this is exactly the point of transparency. This is maybe the best channel of communicating the government, especially to business. Because to citizens maybe it's not that critical yet. But business in most of these countries, and Southeastern Europe as well, is communicating with the government mainly or predominantly by e-media or e-means, e-government. So we, since 4 or 5 years, all tax declarations, fiscal declarations, VAT declarations from the companies or business in Bulgaria, for example, is done by e-signature, by e-documents, by e-application. And there is no paper alternative since 3 years, because by law we used to have that. Okay. Now, how do we move from this to mobile? And that's the question, because in moving the e-government to mobile government or to m-government service is not straightforward. So if you remember, there are at least 5 categories about these e-government services, but I will make like 3 big groups and compare to mobile. So one of them is the information channel, the generation that government wants to inform us, or administration of their services. So this is like the passive channel, we want to receive this information. This is relatively easy to move because there are a lot of RSS or the other services which go straight to the mobile. There are a lot of mobile apps doing that. However, if you try to move the e-government website with the e-services, like we did with the tax declaration or the others, you have this whole complex or complicated interface with cascade menus and all the other things. How you move this on a mobile? even on a smartphone, on a tablet, or any mobile device, you cannot design this. So you have to reshape, or you have to make a new design on that. And that was the first topic of Janine last year. I mean, the old-fashioned things, I mean, the adaptive design. Then we moved to responsive design. Then we said, okay, well, as she was presenting, one web design which will work on everything. And it's again a problem because we want to show so much information, to have so many documents or whatever downloadable, we cannot even touch with the finger, we cannot navigate there. So then the question is, okay, this is the information side. Then the interaction side, where it's one way, we want to download documents or we want to upload or interact somehow with the government. This is not that easy, I would say impossible on some mobile devices, even smartphones, even tablets. Because what you have to do, you have to sign, you have to make this encrypted secure document. Most of the mobile devices are not powerful enough yet. Or even if they are powerful, for example, smartphones, you have a double checker because you have the SIM card and you can put your signature, universal signature or public key signature on it. And it doesn't work because the mobile operators, I think in only one exception in Austria and Estonia now, they allow you to write on the protected part of the SIM card where you can put the signatures. And there is no other experience. I think Verizon in the States, they do something like that. So this is blocking, actually, extending the security as it was on the web or the e-government services on the mobile. And this is really blocking. There is law in most of the countries, there are some directives coming from European Commission or European Union, and this is not followed and this is not adapted yet. So I think this is an issue already because we cannot trust the mobile devices or the documents the same way like we trust the others. On the other hand, more than 90% of the business people or managers or whatever active people in Europe, they have smartphones, they use smartphones. And more than 50% of them use them for mobile banking. And almost every phone, every smartphone has at least one Trojan or one backdoor vulnerability on it, especially Android phones. Because even on the Android phone, the Google apps last year, Google Play now, they put a program that you can upload on your PC, check your Android phone for the vulnerabilities or viruses. This application itself was with a virus. They didn't know. No, they turned it down, they shut it down. So we are very vulnerable on a mobile device. On the other hand, we have it anytime and everywhere, because that's the definition of the mobile actually. And another definition of the mobile is, or another feature of the mobile is that it is not connected. It is not wired. This means that we use wireless. Okay, some of the desktop computers, they use wireless as well. Wireless networks are very easy to break in. So you know the open network, open wireless, you have less than 2 minutes for a non-experienced user to catch all the traffic. Or to hijack the hotspot even. We did it several times just for the conference purposes, like watching what we watch, following what we watch on the screens there. But the secure networks, let's say less secure networks, 2 hours. More secure networks, 24 hours. And I can listen to all the session, everything there. This means, it doesn't mean that I can listen what you do. This means that the applications to be designed, they have to be all the line SSL or encrypted. And they should be designed this way. We did the screening with our security lab in the site center. None of the e-government, even web applications of the Bulgarian government, there are more than 20 public sites, none of them designed in a way that prevents hijacking the encrypted session. Not talking about the mobile at all. Okay. So I think these are the problems we have to face. And on the other hand, again going back to anytime, anywhere. Do you remember another service which governments or state provided to citizens, which goes anytime and anywhere? It's an old service. Do you remember this service? It's not mobile phone. Yes. Anyone remembering this service? Reshna, what are you going to shut down here in Sri Lanka in a few days? 31st of October, the last telegram will be sent. This is service anytime, anywhere. In most of the countries, this is gone. So the only communication is the phone that we have in our pocket. The future society, we have... Yeah,
one last minute.
Yeah, this is the last minute. It's the most exciting one. You know, for the future society, have you ever read or listened to the analysis what your kids or teenagers are sleeping with? Who do they sleep with? Well, okay. No, it's not what you think. Okay. More than 90% in the States, they have their smartphone under their pillow. You say those are the teenagers. This is the future, those are the future managers, and those are the future citizens. They want to communicate somehow, anytime, anywhere. So you'll say adults, it's not the same, 60%. So we have this device anytime, anywhere. So this is exactly the solution of the citizen-centric government. This is what we want to do. There's no other media to do. And we are not ready. That's the conclusion. I mean, all these good examples or bad examples, they show that we are not ready because the third generation of the services, which are mobile services or mobile-oriented services, are not there. We have just the first examples of the GPS-based or inclusion of participation or voting is the same problem with security actually. In Estonia they tried, that's the only country they tried. They proved that voting is as secure as the public infrastructure voting, e-voting.
Okay, thank you very much, George. I think, George, you have heard obviously also of wearable computing. And soon you will not have to have your mobile phone under your pillow, but you will have actually your pillow cover being a mobile phone. So that will add to your concerns regarding security, because the snoring of the entire population, 7 billion people, will converge into the cosmos as one big, big bang sound. So, no, I didn't want to belittle actually your issues on digital signatures. I think these are all critical issues. But I think what is really important is to have a developmental aspect to it. And what I really appreciated about what the governor said and what EQ said was basically to look at where are you actually now in the enabling side, and where governments can also take a lead, because when the governor talks about, creating anti-corruption and transparency and making learning free, he is actually setting with his government a transformative energy in his society, which is very, very important. When EQ says that actually what the Hong Kong government is doing is trying to listen to what the citizens want. Have you heard this recently from Russia? Let's go to Sri Lanka and let's talk about what is actually the re-engineering of government program doing. And it's a very wonderful thing that the program head is here. Please go ahead, Kanchana. If you speak strongly into the microphone, people can just hear you.
Yeah, it is envisioned by the Sri Lanka Initiative and as part of the e-government policy of Sri Lanka to offer all government electronic information and services to citizens in a single portal, single set of common services. So we have been working on it for the last 4 or 5 years. So what we are trying to elevate is to go for a connected government scenario, where citizens are getting information and services from separate entities or separate institutions. They have a place where they can, a single window, they can go there and get the information. So we've been working on it in a web front, where we have developed a country portal to connecting all government organizations to offer their information. And later on, when we look at the mobile penetration, it is way beyond internet and fixed line penetration. And I was looking at the TRC website today, and I noted that by mid-June 2000, this year June, the subscription has gone more than 20 million, whereas fixed line is around 3.8 million. So that shows what kind of mobile subscription, mobile penetration out there in this country. So we have started working on a lot of initiatives where the mobile was the delivery channel, service delivery channel. Now we have started with SMS, where most of a certain population of Sri Lanka are still in agricultural and rural community are based on that. So a lot of information that they want to get from the government. A simple thing like when is the reservoir going to fill the water, so that when they are going to get the water, from there to from tea farmers knowing when I could get my next subsidy and when I could get my field officer down to check my land. From there onwards, more other citizens who want to know where my train, when am I going to get my, when is the next train going to come, the schedule, train schedule. So all that information we were able to provide through SMS. And then what we did was we moved a little bit further. Now we are developing a USSD front end, so that certain information what we realized was that when people type SMS text, they make mistakes. So there are a lot of garbage SMS coming out as part of the delivery channel. So to avoid that, we are moving into USSD as well. And then later on, with the smartphones becoming very popular, we started developing mobile apps. We have a mobile portal, mobile.srilanka.lk, where we from railway schedule to fish prices, daily fish prices, anybody want to know fish prices, to police clearance certificates, various set of government services where they can just get it from this portal. So we are in the initial stages of that. We are working on it, and there are both Android and HTML5 based technologies we are developing. And like the earlier presenter said, the Gartner report says that by 2050, majority of the web apps would have gone to use hybrid technology. So we are moving into that as well. So we have started another development now where we are trying to see that, because we need to go with how the technology moves. And on the other side, mobile payments, which is again a very important aspect, because a lot of people have credit cards, but if you look at the entire population as a whole, the penetration is not much. And then a certain portion of people who are still reluctant to use credit cards to make online payments. So with the establishment of mobile payment guidelines, we are now very aggressively moving on mobile payments. Already a prominent mobile operator is using it, and we have heard another second large operator has got the license. So we are moving into that direction as well, so that more and more government services, even paying services, citizens would be able to get not only through online but through mobile. And for those who are willing to wanting to get those services through online, can use mobile as a payment mechanism when obtaining those services.
Thank you very much for your tour. One of the things which come up when Elizabeth was talking about and the Hong Kong government is basically that she alluded to the importance of open data. And what you do with open data is you are not just telling citizens when the train is coming, but you are making actually the sensor information when the train passes certain kind of gates available to everybody, that they can aggregate those data for a lot of different kind of things. Possibly some people want to have an automatic, let's say, alert. Now I have to go to the train station. Another person wants to read it on their mobile phone. A third person wants to actually look at it in terms of, what is it in terms of air pollution, because trains are running on diesel engines or something. So the interesting issue here is in terms of the push into the next, let's say, generation of mobile as well as content aggregation is actually to make the basic data also accessible. How far are you along on that side?
We have launched the open data portal early this year. So we have received very good responses for that. A lot of government organizations, starting from Department of Motor Traffic, where they give where the emission statuses and what is the vehicle population, and then police records, so that you can determine where are the more where the crime rates are high. So that kind of information is slowly building up. We have a number of data sets. As you said, the beauty of mobile as a delivery channel is the actual mobility. When you are going there, if you have the open data and you have related apps, you would realize that what is the situation. Now, one example that we are currently working on with the National Disaster Management Center, we have a whole set of data sets where which are prone to landslides and very risky areas. As you know, Sri Lanka is all around covered by water. So we are currently in the process of making use of that data, build that app. So whenever a citizen goes, based on that, they can get a meter reading as to how risky those locations are, especially when they want to go for leisure activities, holiday, or low. So that information has become very useful, and we are currently building that app.
Kevin, the last question to you. How far are you in your own state along the road towards open data and using also the creativity of app developers to extract from those open data those valuable information which then can be bundled together in an application?
Thanks. Well, I didn't mention another aspect of our use of technology. Farmers, my state is an agrarian state. I think 70% of the citizens of the state are into one form of agriculture or the other. To ensure that our farmers optimize their productivity, we created what we call agri-input centers in the rural communities. But to be sure that these farmers get their inputs supplied from the government, support from the government, agricultural inputs that they might have to come to the town to procure at times at exorbitant prices. We give them. We took, first of all, we took a census of them and we registered them on an open application. They all have a card, like a credit card. The credit card is the minimum amount of support government will give, but they cannot encash it. They can only use that credit card to procure items from the agri-input centers. And this is another application of the mobile technology, because at the agri-input centers, we have volunteers who man the centers. They don't collect money, but they have this point of sales terminals through which the farmers will go, swipe their card, collect their materials they need in the farm. And again, I must add that we have done a geographic information survey of the farm. We know the total holding of the farmer. A farmer that needs, say, 10 kilograms of fertilizers because of the size of his farm could never collect 20 kilograms. He will only collect the quantity he needs. This is again a clear example of an application of mobile technology. As to your question specifically, what I want us to know first of all that my society is not highly advanced in technology. It cannot be compared with Hong Kong or Eastern Europe. There could be similarity between my society and Sri Lanka to a large extent. So I use technology to, as I've said, to ensure that none of the staffers of the government is permitted or is allowed to stray to a point of cheating the system. So technology is used to ensure that we have efficient assessment of those who are on our way to go. Technology is used to ensure that those who benefit from our healthcare, because we run a free healthcare system, are the actual beneficiaries. That nobody exploits the fact that we extend healthcare services to less privileged, to corrupt the system, and so on. So it is in the application of technology in that area that is preventing manipulation, ensuring efficiency of service delivery, revenue collection, and now in education, where we have to feed. We feed kids of ages between 6 and 9 for good nutrition, and without permitting anybody to exploit our commitment to that service, to overburden the state by taking more than their own share. Those are the things we do with technology, and they have gone a long way in ensuring efficient service delivery and good governance.
Thank you very much, Governor. Janine Warner ended with a point of what is the next wave, and she was thinking of the metaphor of sitting on the beach in Los Angeles. And she was thinking of what's the next wave in terms of technology coming new. But what we realized now when we looked at the transformative nature of mobile technology for government, that we are all sharing the ocean of mobile technology, but on our shores, the waves are very different. Thank you very much for sharing this with us. Thank you very much, Governor. Thank you very much, EQ. Thank you very much, George Sakov. And thank you very much, Kajana Tudukala. And we will have a sign of appreciation for you right away.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, all the panelists as well. So I invite Prashant back on stage again to give you the tokens of appreciation. Nigeria, Mr. Obeni Rao Parekbesola. Then to Dr. George Shako. And to Kanchana Turugalan. Thank you all. And we have a little change in the agenda. We will not be breaking for tea now. I think most of you already have gone outside and sip your tea. And you are free to just go outside, take your refreshments and come inside, please. Because we need a break before the fish balls session. We need to change the setup here. So we will straight away go into the next final session, which is a short one. And may I now invite Madam Dorothy Gordon, the Director General of Ghana, India Coffee Ghana Center for Excellence, the ICTA Ghana, to moderate the session on mobile as a learning and knowledge device. Over to you, Madam.
Thank you so much. It's a pity that most of the people are out of the room for such a critical session, which is on e-learning. Talking about the knowledge economy, we know that this is perhaps the most important area if we're going to build our societies. In developing countries, we have a huge demographic of young people that need to be prepared for the knowledge society. And in some of the more mature economies, the question is how you transition from one kind of economy to another kind of economy where you have huge dependency ratios. So far, the jury is still out in terms of what mobile means for learning. The data on massive open online courses shows that hardly anybody completes them. Distance education, very iffy. So I'm really pleased that on this panel we have two speakers who are going to allow us to appreciate what is happening for the next generation and at the same time look at one of the very successful implementations of micro-learning globally. So it's my pleasure now to invite to give his short talk Badr Wad. Is he around? Yes, a good friend of mine. He's coming from ICTA. He's a chief executive officer, and it's a leading digital and mobile content services company. But at the same time, Badr spends a lot of his time on a wonderful application which is called LAMSA, which allows children in the kingdom to actually get online before, let's say they start getting online as soon as they can move their hands, basically. So online from week 1. Badr, you're on.
Thank you for that nice introduction, Dorothy. So, I'm not sure if you can see the pictures clearly, but I'm sure most of you are familiar with that tower in the back. It's, if you can't see it properly, it's Burj Khalifa, the largest tower in the world, and that's where I'm coming from, the Middle East. But the most important thing are the two kids in that picture, which are Julie and Adam, my children, 4 and 5-year-old. So that's when the whole story started. When my kids were growing up, I was looking and had the need and the drive to kind of give them some educational content, but very contextual to the region and the language of the Arabic language and the Arabic region, and also in terms of not just the language itself, but the values and culture behind it. Thank you. And research has shown that it's very critical to kind of build the right foundation for children to be ready to step into their educational career at a young educational track at a young age. And most recent research showed that at the age, there's a pivotal point in time, which is grade 3, where there's a major transition in the child's journey, where he moves on from reading, learning to read, and then moves on to reading to learn. And with that comes an obvious result, which is we find that more than 80% of the top selling paid apps on the app stores target children, and more specifically toddlers and preschoolers. And that's not a bad thing. I mean, I go up in conferences and talk about children, and I get a lot of resistance saying it's bad, right? Or it's controversial. But then the results show that there is a lot of good results behind this, and we see that students that are exposed to this technology and mobile at a young age have shown that they outperform students that don't get exposed to a certain extent of 25% at the age of 5, or almost 18% at the age of 3. And with these important results, there comes the need to create this ecosystem. The ecosystem which is so critical to the foundation of the educational system. And by talking to a lot of media and educational providers, you see that we're still stuck into the ecosystems, right? Each one's trying to create their own, or trying to maintain their own traditional ecosystem. So I just came back yesterday from the Abu Dhabi Media Summit, where we were discussing, we had major industry leaders like Anand, the president of edX, and some industry leaders in the media as well. Each one has their own perspective in terms of where education is going, as Dorothy mentioned, the MOOCs, and what is the impact of the MOOCs on the educational system. But despite all of the various angles that were discussed, we all reached a consensus that a revolution is happening in the educational system, especially with the mobile. And that evolution has not happened in education so far for many reasons, including the egos that we discussed. But now, over the last 2 years, we're seeing that happening. And I'm here today to share some of the things that we have learned about dealing with children and building an ecosystem which empowers them. So when we started working with children, we started with a version that looks something like this on the left that you see here. And we thought that the parents would be taking the decision on behalf of the children. We thought that parents were the decision makers, or the power was with them. But obviously we were wrong, all right? And we've learned that the hard way. So we kind of listened and we analyzed and we studied every single movement that the child was making on our applications. And we realized that the only decision the parent was taking was to give the device to the child. And then the child took over from there. And so based on these findings and findings on the ground, we kind of shifted the entire experience. And this is LAMSA version 2.0. And as you can see, there isn't a single word there. Everything is visual, right? Because children seem to be smarter than us. They understand visuals more than we can. So if I tell you to all agree on certain visuals there, you wouldn't be able to do so. But children do. And they sit down and they click these buttons so fast and so naturally. So we've kind of gone into a lot of analysis and studies and details to kind of think on behalf of the children rather than try to guide them. So we kind of get in their shoe. And I've been spending a lot of time with children over the past year, talking to them, playing with them, and just being with them to kind of understand what they do, what they want to do. And as you can see, we put a lot of effort into kind of revamping this whole thing to be suiting every single child. And we've noticed that there are different levels of children. So some can swipe, some can press. So the product needs to kind of incorporate all of these different natural things that the children do. And I encourage you to spend as much time with children if you're developing these products as possible. Another important angle a strategic decision that we took was to kind of say local versus global. So with apps, with the digital world, with everything that we're doing, there are no boundaries except the ones that we define. However, it's very important for you to choose a starting point, and we have chosen very clearly to have Arabic as a DNA for our product. So we decided that all of the content and the messages and the values and the language delivered via LAMSA will be in Arabic, and based on that we built certain globalization angles to it, whereby you can view different options in French and English. But it's very important for us, and it was very important for us to define that DNA as an Arabic DNA. And it's not, when we talk about Arabic, we don't just talk about the language itself, but we also talk about and we focus on the culture. So in most of the stories, the content for kids, you find out, you'll see something similar to this, which is a prince or a princess wearing a crown. But then what are the values behind that we're delivering is very important and should be very contextual to your region. So here we have a princess waking up in the morning, but instead of thinking about her prince in the morning, we kind of embed a prayer, a morning prayer, which is very local to the Islamic, or very contextual to the Islamic teachings. And with this, surprisingly, we've seen a lot of kids waking up and saying their morning prayers based on what they saw on LAMSA, right? Without having to kind of enforce it on them. They kind of feel, if the princess in the story is doing that, I want to do it as well. So we've been able to deliver these very small but very important things. And while we develop the characters in LAMSA, we also bring a very local yet global angle to it. So this is a character that we've developed on LAMSA. His name is Yasser. So Yasser is a young boy, but as you can see, he's wearing his traditional clothes, but it's very important that we put him in a context of, look at his shoes. He's not wearing the traditional shoes. We're reflecting what's happening in society. And this is where a global company and we do compete with global companies like Disney and Sesame on the digital world, they cannot put this on the shelf. It's not ready-made. These things you learn by being in the culture, by being part of the culture. And with taking all of this into consideration, we go out and we talk to children. And this is what Gary was talking about, and most of the keynote speakers today were talking about building that relationship. Not just sticking to the digital world, but having an emotional side to it. And we've been very good at that, and we've been very focused at that. So we meet thousands of kids. I personally, most of the pictures here include me with kids, talking to them, studying their behavior, and listening to them. And we also do that by, we've developed this mobile exhibition where we go to schools and nurseries, and we run art classes, and that's all. The result of that all comes back to the digital world. But it's a complete activation which does, involves a lot of offline as well. So that's something that I encourage any developer. Don't just stick to to your conference room where you sit behind the lab and machines. Go out, talk to your consumer. For us, it's been very beneficial to a point where we've reached more than 2.5 million reads on our platform in less than a year. So our stories have been read more than 2.5 million times, and we compete with the top. So we compete with Disney on our local market. So you can see these are snapshots from the app stores. So we compete. Sometimes Disney Toy Story goes in first place. Sometimes we go. And the other benchmarks here is Lamsa having the #1 app in the books category, but also the other reading is that it also competes on the gaming category. And that's where it's very important for us to think of education and entertainment in a very complementing manner. So not to look at each one in isolation, because definitely consumers look at it as a combined experience. So you cannot offer educational products to children and expect them to spend and to love the product and to spend as much time as possible, but they view it as a product which does entertainment and education for them. And these benchmarks don't show that we're the best product, but it shows that there's huge demand locally. And I'm sure that's the case also with all of you from wherever region you're coming from. It's always, and I started working with Disney and Sesame products a few years ago, and we started with purely Arabizing them. And we found out that that's not what the region wants. We found out that the region wants more than that. They want you to cater for not just the language and a pure translation, but it needs to be contextual, it needs to be relevant. And that's when we decided to kind of go independently, and now we have major brands like Disney and Sesame coming back to us and saying, how can you help us tap into the region and talk to the hundreds of thousands of kids that you were able to talk to them. And for us, again, going back to Gary and the keynote speaker today, it's about the relationship. It's about the trust that you built. And that relationship is allowing us to tap into a lot of avenues and being the kind of digital platform that enables a safe environment. It needs to be safe. You need to kind of control it. And I asked, in the Abu Dhabi Media Summit, I asked the Twitters and the Googles, and everyone was trying to promote the advertising. And I asked them, with children it's different, so no one had a clear answer. It's all new. So you kind of need to set the benchmark on what is, the do's and don'ts in advertising for children. But one more angle I want to focus on before I end is the special needs. So a device for special needs in the mobile world used to cost more than $15,000 before the iPad came out. Now you have thousands of apps catering to different special needs, including autism. And based on this, what we have done, we've been engaged for 1 year now with the Center of Autism and Research in Saudi Arabia, which is a government and private center. And we've been working on 3 mandates, which are very important, and you will see the results of them going forward. We've been making autism-friendly content, which will go on our platforms in the near future, but we're also working on compiling a long-term research report which will go on a global level to kind of set the standards and benchmarks for anyone that wants to develop content or technology for special needs. And I'd like to call on anyone who's interested in this space and wants to contribute to this report to kind of see me after this, because it's a long-term project and it's going to serve the global space. With that, I leave my contact details for anyone that wants to get in touch. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bana. That was really a wonderful talk from one of the world's leading experts in edutainment. And I just wonder how many of the universities which are in the room with us now have got courses on how to develop edutainment products. And it just tells us that this whole field of education, it's not just about the transfer of skills to the next generation or even to improving the skills of our professionals, but it's also about how we are going to package training for the new skills that are required to develop the products in mobile learning. And I think that is a wonderful connection to our next speaker. Gregor, great. So Gregor is not too far away. And I'm trying to remember what Gregor does. Of course, that's not entirely true. Gregor is one of the people that I admire most because he's one of the few people that has actually developed micro-learning that works. There's a lot of talk about this particular area, but most people get fed up when they're trying to read text on a very small screen. It's precisely what I was talking about, different kind of skill sets required to put that information in a form that people can actually connect to. Gregor's background is in media science, communication science, TV, and so he masters the image. Would you say that you do that, Gregor? So let me give you now to your audience and let them discover the world of micro-learning.
Hi everyone. Thanks for having me here. I'm very glad to be on this stage with this great audience. And I want to share a bit of my learnings from the past five to 6 years, developing micro-learning, developing mobile learning, and implementing mobile learning projects for railway companies, for supermarkets, but also for public administration and universities. We have seen great educational projects for kids already, great winners from Argentina, from countries like Nigeria, and also from New Zealand. And I want to now present a bit of what we have developed in Austria to really enable everyone to use this mobile phone for learning and to make learning more effective. So the question that we have asked ourselves when we started developing microlearning was, how can we overcome the inefficiencies of classroom training? And the inefficiencies do not start when you leave the class, as you can see here in this image, when the forgetting starts, but the inefficiencies start much, much earlier. They start when you enter the class, and not all the students are on the same level of knowledge. When you use the classroom time for transfer of knowledge, that could be done in much more effective ways before. When you use the classroom time not for interaction, not for play, not for co-creation, what it's supposed to be for. We also asked ourselves, how could we reinforce the things that you already heard, that you learned, and help you to remember in another way than giving you just a PowerPoint slide, or just giving you a handout or a script that will end up in another pile of history. We also asked ourselves how we could support learners in a better way to deal with the limited time and the huge amount of information they get and remember the stuff that is really important. And this is what we have come up with. Well, in 2004. And in 2004, you probably did not use your mobile phone to listen to MP3s or to surf the web or manage your calendar event. But we were lucky enough to develop this in a research institute in Austria and not as a private company. So we had the possibility to reiterate on it and to work with great partners and companies like Remax in real estate training, like Bristol Myers Squibb, a pharmaceutical company, to improve the continuous medical education of doctors, and also with railway companies. We worked with government institutions and helped to support the government reform in Macedonia. But our product has also been implemented and is still used in all these institutions and also in universities, as you can see below. What we have learned from over the past 10 years and from these projects and working with these partners is that mobiles are really a great way to deal with the situation that people don't have the time to go to a class for 1 hour or don't have the time to learn for 40 minutes at once. Mobiles are a great way to make you independent of a schedule and learn when you are ready for it. We also learned that active retrieval, questioning yourself, testing yourself, is far more effective to learn and remember something than just sitting there and listen, than just reading a book, than just flipping through a slide deck. And we have seen that if you do this repeatedly, then you can reach a very high level of retention and keeping the stuff that is important for the higher skills and abilities you want to develop based on it. So our research and our product is also inspired and built on the Nobel Prize-winning research of Eric Kandel, who got the Nobel Prize in Medicine in 2000 because he was able to prove that there's an actual physical growth in your brain and that your brain works almost like a muscle. So if you do the same thing repeatedly, there is actually a physical change in your brain happening. We also found out that it's quite helpful to engage users continuously and that you do the learning not just at once. So we also found ways and developed ways that were in the beginning more intrusive, but we learned from our learners to make them, enable them to configure these ways of reminding them, these ways of pushing them to learn and to test themselves. So what we've come up with is the product Knowledge Pulse that is unique in 3 ways. It's unique because it's small steps, so you can do it even in between. Well, when you're working in a supermarket and you have your shift, but there are not so many customers in the store, you go to the back and you do just 10 minutes of learning until more customers coming in and you have to go back. It's based on repetition, so you can see on this slide that the stuff that you have tested yourself on and that you didn't know, it will come back again. And it's also using push, so it will remind you to do this continuously. It's a real mobile product, so it works on all the mobile platforms, and I guess you have not seen another mobile learning system that will work on iOS and on Android, but also work on your ebook reader or on your BlackBerry or on your Windows Phone device. It's adaptive to what you already know. You can configure the push, as I said before, and it will not only remind you of things that you have not mastered before, it will also remind you when there is new learning material coming in, new stuff that you should look at. The format is very simple, so here you can see 3 examples of how microlearning, how mobile learning can work in different areas. First we see a knowledge card from an oil drilling company, and this works on a Windows PC in this case. And the second is you see how this could work for public administration on a BlackBerry, and you see on the third screen how this could work for a school in Guyana to learn chemistry. But it's not just a quiz, so when you do not get the questions right, you can read the explanations and really gain insight. Very importantly, you have just-in-time access, so at any time you can search and look up information that you need. For example, when you're working for an airline company and you're on board of an A380, and there's an emergency while one crew member is already dealing with the passenger, you can still look up the information on your mobile device because you have all the training material that you need for the A380 with you. And if you see there is something missing on the material as a learner, then you can still add to it. You can add a learning card, or you can give feedback to your supervisor, to your trainer, and say, hey, this learning card has to be updated, or this is missing an image. So this way, also the learners contribute to the improvement of the learning. This is an overview of the system. So you have the client app, which you download to any mobile device, and I'm inviting you to do so after my presentation. There's an admin interface where you can create those cards on the web very easily. And I want to end my presentation with just one example where microlearning is used today. This is from a supermarket chain in Austria, where all their employees have to learn about the products, they have to learn about customer service, and they have more than 50 courses. So this is an example where they can learn how to distinguish if fruit or vegetables are still fresh, and what they can do if they are not so fresh anymore, where to place them, how they could still sell it maybe. So this is used in 207 stores so far. And this is the feedback from the HR manager, who says that it's helpful for them because they can really integrate it into their work practice. So you can really adjust it to your work schedule and make it work that the learners don't have to learn at home. They can do if they want, but they also have, in this case, they have 10 to 15 minutes a day for learning because it's a value for the company. So to end my presentation, I want to invite you to go to our website, try it out, download it for free from any of the app stores or directly from our website. Thank you very much.
So I think you've taught us that we really need to have Nobel Prize winning information on how brains work if we're going to build successful e-learning content. We now have just time for a few quick questions, so if I could see hands. Okay, let's do the two over here. We'll ask all the questions and then we'll get the response from the panel.
A quick question about the language. Is that provided in Arabic language or not yet?
Yes, I'd like to see more, maybe if you could talk about what ways in which you could have a social impact. How are you addressing issues related to poverty in terms of education, perhaps through some of these apps, or how could you do that?
Okay, and then we have one question over here.
I think it's about, because mainly, I assume it's mainly Arabic application, and Arabic is spoken throughout the region. And there is a certain vernacular, the differences in the way that Arabic is spoken. And how do you sort of attribute that kind of, for little children it's very important, because in Sri Lanka we have the same situation. On mobile, Signal is not that, ODIOS, but Android we have certain problems right now at the moment. Text, but that's the question that I have to ask.
This is a question for Gregor. Gregor, if you're planning an educational platform for a continent of, say, 20 or 30 countries that have different textbooks that are used at different times, would your system be able to work within that kind of complexity?
Gregor, I think you've got quite a few questions. Why don't we start with you?
So, first of all, the Arabic question is easy to answer. Yes, our application supports Arabic and is used by public administration in Abu Dhabi and in Bahrain, for example. This was a challenge when you look at all the multiple platforms that we support. To answer your question, that is definitely an issue to support Arabic on Windows Phone devices. So I hope Microsoft is learning from I'm seeing that Microsoft has already learned from that, and in the new 8.5 version is also supporting Arabic. And 44 countries, we are seeing that there is great interest in our product from the book publishers.
to see that there can be, they can get a in direct contact with their audience, with their readers, having their email addresses when they register for the system, and also potentially generating new revenue. So we are collaborating with them and enabling them to put their own applications, branded applications like Langenscheid or Fakultas or different publishers putting their own apps based on our product now into the app stores, and building a platform where you can really manage the organizations and organizational levels that you would need for the different countries, districts, schools, and so on, is definitely an interesting challenge for us that we are looking forward to work on it over the next 2 years.
I think that it really gets back to the kind of business model and some of the comments you made, Badr, when you were making your presentation. If we think of the way you put it, I think it would be highly risky to try and create learning platforms for multiple countries at one time, because what you were saying is the importance of local knowledge, and the local knowledge of the culture and the culture of learning, the interpretation of image is so important. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I'd like to also handle the question about the values. So it's about, so we've got two angles, the language. So over the past few years with the media, a new Arabic common language has been used. So it's even called Common Media Arabic. So we're kind of using that common media, exactly, CMA. So we're using it's the same kind of language being used by Al Jazeera and Al Arabiya to kind of talk to the majority of Arabs throughout the world. So we're using that as the base for our product. However, for a more localized experience, especially with kids, you have the option to kind of get the voice over in a specific accent, right? But we want to make the product as generic for the Arabic region as possible. But then there is also that the technology is unlimited what you can kind of offer to kids, but it's just a matter of usability. That's one. And secondly, on the values question, we work with actually NGOs and some of these leading brands who have CSR mandates to deliver certain values in terms of savings that could result poverty, saving sustainability, water consumption, preserving green, and all of that. So we kind of take these big value messages and we incorporate them in the building of the content itself.
Excellent. I think that you'll agree with me that we've had a very... Oh, there's one last question. I think we have to round it up. I'm being given desperate signals by the organizers, so let's take it offline. I think we can agree that we've had, really a lot of food for thought. I can't see Govind, but it looks to me, Badr, as if you've reinforced Govind's message that we can't teach 5-year-olds entrepreneurial skills. If we want to do it, we just have to be creative about it. But I think the main message here is that it's a very new field. We cannot pick up our old approaches to pedagogy in this field. We have to be very innovative. It's a combination of many disciplines, including those in the entertainment field, as well as the education field and psychology, of course. So thank you all, and I think please let's give our panelists a round of applause. Enjoy your coffee.
May I ask Madam Dorothy to join us to give away the certificates of appreciation. First to Badr Award from Saudi Arabia. Thank you very much. And for Gregor Choleva.
What exactly is the value that we're getting from it. And so I'd like to explore a bit more And one of the challenges that I've had, you know, my focus isn't necessarily local because we're developing ways to use ICT to scale up initiatives that can help poverty alleviation on a global scale. And I think important things to consider is in terms of what you do with design and how you use a format that really speaks to people. But I think we need to begin thinking about how can we include those that are completely excluded. It's wonderful all of us here have smart devices and tablets and phones and all of these things. But there's so many people around the world that need access to this information. And I sometimes feel as though we're not putting enough emphasis on it. And it's wonderful for me, you know, I've lived in Serbia, I've lived in the United States, and now in Colombia. I have a new doctor now. I have no idea what my medical records are, and I'm only 28 years old. What's going to happen when I'm in my 60s and actually have problems that I need to track throughout all the different countries that I've lived in. So I think there's wonderful things that are being designed for somebody like me. But I've had opportunities and I've had education. But what about the rest of the world? And how are we connecting them? And when people are immigrating to their countries and maybe sending remittances back home, what's being done to ensure that they're remaining connected with their families? And how are we really creating content that can be helpful for them? I think that's something that we need to consider a little bit more.
Okay, this is the waterfall issues. Let's pick them a little bit apart and so that we're not getting, let's say, submerged.
Maybe just to touch on what she said, I come from Africa, mainly Tanzania, a great place, y'all should visit. And in Tanzania, I actually met some people who are actually designing apps for example, women in rural areas on how to deliver babies, because there's a lot of like infantile deaths happening and so forth. So there are apps being designed for people from rural areas, not just in Tanzania. I know it's happening in Botswana, Lesotho. I'm pretty sure even in Zimbabwe, some of these apps are being made specifically for women. There's also apps being created to educate young people. So they create things even for like the normal, not so smartphone, and they use that to pass out in schools and so forth. So there's initiatives that are being done. And personally, for my project, I've actually gotten some great ideas just talking to a lot of people over here, and also from listening to what's being done about how I can improve my project, like by creating an app for African Queens Project. And this way it'll be easier to reach more people and also have more access in terms of my project. So yeah, I think that's it in a nutshell.
Okay, maybe David Shelton's can jump in here, because the issue is very much what do you need to answer the questions which Anna and Gloria have when you want to become an entrepreneur and develop those applications. You were reflecting on some of this in your talk. You want to intervene on this and jump in on this conversation and say, okay, how do you get from a waterfall of issues down to something which is realizable?
I think part of the process of determining which direction you want to go is really first following your passions. Because if your passion is going to direct you more into what specifically you need to pursue, and it's also going to increase the likelihood that you are going to stick with it and stick with it through all the ups and downs, which is the life of a startup or a mission, if you will. And you'll be more pure to your vision all the way through, because there'll be a lot of distractions. People are going to have their own, even people that are going to help you are going to have their own intentions. And if you have a true passion for it, you're going to stick with it longer. And so that's important. And of course, sustainability. So we talk about the heart and the mind being those are factors of being sustainable. Then we look at the hard facts of making it sustainable from a financial point of view and making sure you keep the customers engaged. So it's still you have to make that balance of the business.
Because otherwise you're giving a lifetime of advice in 3 minutes. Okay? What you need to do is obviously you need to break it down a little bit. These 3 chairs are free for those people who want to jump in and contribute. So I will not call up everybody here and say, Janine, why don't you want to come? Or Yaku, why don't you come? And Ivo, why don't you come? And and everybody else.
but you can jump in and contribute to the discussion. Let's look at this issue, which Anna started. There's a lot of things which we want to do, but with glorious citizens, there's only one thing which I'm able to carry. Right? So how do you break this down, and how do you actually then move ahead? What have you learned from what we have done so far and discussed here?
I think on a kind of similar tip to what these guys have mentioned, what's been interesting for me is mainly the things, we're in a situation that's a few steps behind, obviously, so we're looking at things where Zimbabwe might be in a long time. But so right now, like the InfoCell presentation yesterday, using offline, online interaction and having some kind of hybrid, that's useful for us because we need to connect to rural areas as well as just the urban, rather than being...
Infoline.
Sorry?
The application is Infoline.
Yes, in Ghana.
And Infotel is the exhibition here. So you're currently...
I'm getting them mixed up.
Yes, you're getting very mixed up.
Okay.
You get big business mixed up with smart solutions.
Okay. What you said.
That's not the same.
Okay. But those kind of platforms are useful for us. I mean, for example, in Zimbabwe in the recent elections, there wasn't really a shutdown of social media spaces, but what did happen was in the lead up to the elections, bulk SMS platforms were shut down because that's how you're reaching out to the people. So it's interesting to see, we're going to have a long bridge between now and when we become as advanced as other places, so what we can film in that bridge using government and smartphones.
I will do something which I promised I won't do. Just leave the Charlotte, leave the microphones with people, please. And I asked Yao Salamanca to come in here because he is the director of the Digital Empowerment Foundation. And what he has done and contributed to the World Summit Award is actually a focus on how to get technology to deliver good content to the masses. And maybe you can answer this also, what Anna was talking about and what we are just actually engaging in here. In terms of your own experience, what has really worked in India, and where is actually, when you are looking at the developmental curve of mobile technology with phones, feature phones and things like this, where is something which is really effective in terms of making an intervention and what kind of social good does it deliver? Osama.
Yeah, well, mobile being a whole communication tool is certainly going beyond this medium barrier. It's a medium which is a natural medium. So that way it's going deeper into the rural areas. But if you come to work in terms of larger work like interactivity, in terms of doing some work and doing transactions, studies or educational material, one of the things that we have experimented which has worked extremely well is wireless technology, Wi-Fi technology, the last mile. So since, let's say you have a pipe up to the level, which is town or a place which is more developed, and then you use the open spectrum. There are open spectrum in each and every country, free spectrum, which you can use and broadcast it to miles and miles. I mean, we have done in remote tribal areas, covered 200 kilometers by hopping one point to the other, by creating small towers and talking one tower to multiple towers. So that is one of the things, and you can create your own mesh network, internal mesh network, and talk to each other. There is an example called Nepal Wireless in Nepal, who do e-commerce on intranet on 6,000 feet, in the hills and on the community, and they have no connection outside world, but they use all Wi-Fi network. So wireless and a mix of mobile is creating a lot of connectivity in the remote areas. Although having said that, it requires to understand that how these cheap technologies, free spectrum, all should come together to use that.
There is somebody from UEFA here, the winner from Switzerland. Do you want to just explain what you have been doing, because that's exactly an extension of what Osama says and gives an answer to what's happening in Zimbabwe.
Currently designed for the alpine sector. That means we reach remote areas by using a kind of mesh network technology that disseminates data from phone to phone to phone. And
peer to peer to peer, and you don't need actually central transmitters.
Okay. The beauty of the technology is not about having peer-to-peer. It's basically about that the information tries to find destination on its own, so it's epidemically spreading through multiple peers, so all the phones in the range are put into the communication network.
So it is based on the particular application that each one of the mobile device should have that application, right?
Exactly. At the moment it's built into our Alpine Safety application, but actually it's running as an individual stack that can sit between an application layer and the operating system.
And is it smartphone based?
It's smartphone based.
Okay, but it's epidemic mobile, so it really shows that when you are moving from feature phone to smartphone, you are actually enlarging, like a wildfire, the possibility of actually accessing content. You wanted to say something?
I just wanted to ask, it might be a silly question, but I'm not very technologically minded.
There's no silly questions. Everybody of us has pockets of ignorance which need to be enlightened by silly questions.
Good to know, thanks for that. So would that ever be possible to work on non-smartphones? So the distribution of information, for example, to rural areas of certain issues, could that happen without smartphones? Or?
Yeah, it's actually a very basic technology, the C++ library that we shaped into Java and Objective-C to run on an Android and iPhone, but actually could run on any Linux box in a femtocell or any other computer that is hooked to any vital frequency range. So we stick with the Wi-Fi frequency at the moment, but actually will run also with other frequencies.
So like on a non-smartphone it could work down the line?
That's absolutely true.
I see that Sharif has joined us. Do you want to comment on that, please?
I would like to share a success story about this mobile applications. What the major problem what we have overcome in our country, India. In India, getting blood in emergencies is very difficult. Like every year, our country needs almost 5 crore unit of blood. But unfortunately, we are getting only 10% of blood. So we thought of developing application, like we have developed Java, like Symbian, normal phones, even in normal phones also, people can, not only smartphones, even the basics and the Symbian phones also they can able to access. And we have developed Android, Windows, iOS applications also. Now people, youngsters, they can able to register with their smartphones as a voluntary blood donor. And anyone from across the country, from any states, like we have states and districts and locations, with simple touch and with a single call, they can get blood in their particular location within half an hour, maximum within 30 minutes. So for this, we have worked almost 1 year, and youngsters from different states, unknown, all are unknown, all are strangers to me. They come forward after knowing about this cause. They come forward from one from north, one from south, one from middle of our country, because we have almost 110 crores population. In 110 crores population, people come forward, different people come forward from different communities, different states, different places, religions. We have chosen 4 best youth who are really committed to solve this problem. Now, a minimum per day, in a day, 1,000 people are getting blood with this smartphone application.
I just have a general comment. I think sometimes we get so caught up in pushing down technology down people's throats, sometimes we forget about the mindset of people and sort of assimilating them to understand. So whether it's running workshops or projects or things to actually get people to understand that it's a good thing. So you can't just bust into a rural area, hand a person a phone, an application, tell them this will change your life. We got first giving them that process of understanding. So I just thought that was an important point to make.
That's the reason why Gloria was actually saying maybe we need a workshop and go much slower to understand what he was talking about. Do you want to translate other aspects of this?
No, I think people understood me.
Yes. Okay, good. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so the point that I wanted to make is that we work in many remote areas where there is no basic literacy. And we always think that when you're taking a computer or a mobile, don't they need the first layer of literacy before they get into the second layer of literacy? And this is very important for anybody who light or who think that technology can do wonders and who also do not think that technology can really cannot do anything, or pedagogy and all that. We have experimented over a period of time that if the broadband is there, audio-visual medium is there, then you do not need any basic literacy to hop into a new medium. Absolutely. You literally do not. The reason is that it has to be audio-visual, seamless connectivity with broadband. As soon as you have that one, you just say the first click YouTube and second click some Google and all that, and after that it is like peer learning. You then start learning from each other. So this whole audio-visual medium, the natural medium, this technology has created the new medium of knowing, learning, or transmitting information. I want to break this myth that if there is a broadband and remote areas, you do not really need a basic literacy to take place. You can really, you do not need to have a basic literacy to take place. You directly can go into digital literacy without having knowing ABCD or alphabets, immediately. Not that they won't know, but you don't need that.
A prime example of that is just
No. You can do this, but you have to figure out which chair you want to take. These people are very territorial. One of the people, so David, you want to clear your chair, and Gary, you want to sit down here? Yes? Go there. Take responsibility for the internet.
Sir, I just a comment. Just to illustrate that it's not just adults. I mean, the prime example that everybody uses, children. Children jump into technology, will use a remote before the parents. They'll be able to program things because there's no barrier, and it's all audiovisual. It's a click and learn. And so I just want to concur and say, look, it's a global phenomenon. That good design drives engagement and learning.
What he actually was talking about is all cultures moving to the audiovisual age without the break of being textual.
There's a very human trait which is cross-cultural that children will adopt, and absolutely. They can. Certain cultures have more proclivity towards that than others, but absolutely.
Also, I think this line between the both of the new learners of digital are as good as kids. They don't have to unlearn anything.
Before Osama continues to be smart, we have the good thing is Gary has to stay here because it's part of the game that your chair is already taken, you cannot return. Okay, go ahead.
Alright, I'm Miller from the University of Jaffna, Sri Lanka. I'm Miller Alexander.
Miller Alexander, okay.
From the University of Jaffna, Sri Lanka. And as Mr. Aziz said, the donation is our project also. But they are doing for the smartphones, and we are, as our friend said, for the rural place, we using the USSD technology to interconnecting people. So we using the LBS technology to finding a little coverage, only the coverage people, and let you know there is a blood donation needed, and we make it fast this process by using this technology for everyone. Can I say that?
With the help of this platform, now we got these registered, so we are starting our mobile application in Sri Lanka also. So we can not only thank you so much for this platform. And today we got people from Sri Lanka as well as Nepal. So by next 2 months, we are going to start all the applications to overcome this problem in Sri Lanka, both in Sri Lanka and Nepal countries.
Thanks to this progress, it's already succeeded on this project. It's a winning project. So we have a contribution by our USSD part. So join together, India versus Sri Lanka. There is nothing versus. So we interconnect this, and for Sri Lanka, we are using the mobile application from their part and our USSD interconnected. We want to promote the friends to support in Sri Lanka as soon as possible. Maybe before this year. Thank you.
In classical music, you call this a duet.
Kind of.
This is what you call the technology rap.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one thing. It's very important to start thinking about other areas and other disciplines to take into consideration. This specific issue related to health. I don't know if any of you have read the book Nudge. Yeah, behavioral economics book. It's very interesting. And so if you start thinking about ways in which you can nudge people towards better behavior, you can send a text message to someone and let them know that this is important, or let them know that somebody needs their blood. But if you think about the way in which you say that message, the moment in which it's delivered, and there's a lot of experimental studies that are being done on how to involve psychology and all of these different disciplines into thinking about it. So I think it's something important for all of you who are developing content.
Kabir joined us here, and he needs a microphone, and I'm happy to tell everybody else who has nothing to say to leave the circle. But Kabir,
thank you. My name is Kabir from Nigeria. I just wanted to make three interesting. I wasn't actually mentioning solutions.
Speak loudly into the microphone.
It's interesting. I wasn't actually mentioning solutions. My senior here was mentioning, so I got interested, and I wanted to talk about three things. The first one was I wanted to lend voice to what you mentioned about how people can easily transit from how people can quickly learn technology. And I wanted to give you an example that I'm aware of. I'm part of the team that implemented the tablet of knowledge in Nigeria. And what we found was that in our own program, we actually had a change management plan. We had a plan to teach the students. But we wanted to roll out the tablets first for training, for exercise. What we found was that it didn't take the students time before they started using the tablets. It was better than what we had planned. In fact, it got to a stage where they figured out how to put content that we didn't want them to put on it. So we actually learned from them. So it's amazing how people who we think are not that knowledgeable are that some. And that says the rural people are smart. You may not know, but they actually know what they want. You just have to give them the right solution, the direction. That's the first thing I wanted to say. The other thing I wanted to say to what you raised, the point was very sound. We easily get lost in the sophistication of technology and then forget the majority of people who actually don't have access to it, and we think more of the smartphones, etc. Smartphones, etc. And you're right. How do we solve the problems of the majority of the world? Because the majority are poor, and that's why it's nice to hear interesting things we've done. The thing I've heard a lady from Ghana do regarding community health, and I think my answer, what I wanted to raise in that direction was that there are times when solution is not really about the use of sophisticated technology. It's about solving a concise social problem with the simplest technology. It may just be text message, quite interestingly. It may be voice. It may just be a manual process. So that's it. The last thing I wanted to add was, I think the answer to what you said concerning Africa, the related poor is that I think we should encourage the development of more innovation centers in this case, because they are the best to solve the problems, quite interestingly. Those solutions don't really come from, the best solutions come from the people. So I want to put it to the floor that we should endeavor to help the development of innovation centers. You don't have to be sophisticated. I hope that helps.
You'll get the panic back for stopping. Okay, I'm going. You have the last one.
Then I'm going to relinquish my chair.
Then you have to find which you want to take outside.
I'm ready. Actually, Kabir, I want to just add I think we talk about nudge and the ability to push information, but I think we as developers think too much about the fact that we know so much and that we are going to transfer our wealth of knowledge to the multitudes. And I think what you're saying, and I think what is the takeaway for most of the opportunities here, is to facilitate. And it's that two-way street that drives huge engagement. And with health, for example, if you can create a two-way sort of compliance messaging with somebody, as opposed to just notification, take your meds, for example, which happens in Africa all the time. You know, compliance is a big issue. So if you can create two-way, if you just tell somebody take your meds, there will be no compliance. If you say to somebody take your meds and they have to reply, so there's a two-way street, the compliance goes up 100%. And so it's all about creating the ability for them to interact and create knowledge in a two-way street. So I agree 100%. And I will raise the question.
Knowledge is a good way of doing it. Please.
Yeah. I'm Mahinda Rajapaksa from India, and we work in the education sector. To just what the discussions are, I just wanted to add one point that we believe any product, like what you said, technology is just one small element to it. It's actually the whole environment. You know, in learning, the most important is the teacher. The technology plays a small role, the content, you know, and the whole ecosystem as to how the child is learning and engaging with the teacher, with the technology, and with the content. Where us as developers, where we forget is we forget the most important part, which is the engagement of the child. You know, not putting anyone down, but there have been products out there in the market where you have an interactive whiteboard, and the teacher has the content, and the teacher is just playing the video, pausing it, and playing the next video. I don't see any advantage because the children are just sitting there staring at a big, huge 78 inches screen. You know, so if we can have products where we are involving the whole engagement of everyone, you know, then I guess it will be the right way to go.
Key thought coming from here, from there, and so on is we have the opportunity now to make media interactive. The issue is make also the developmental process interactive, and then to go actually into kind of social organization and culture where interactivity is actually the means for including everybody in the developmental process of maturing and ripening and actually growing. And I think this is something which Roberto wanted to talk about.
I want to add one point in the security point of view to this topic, because information is always too powerful, no? And in the wrong hands, we can lead to things we don't desire. For example, now if you go to a bar with your Facebook app, the graph search, you can find single woman, 25 years, that like Game of Thrones, that are studying in my university, that are in this bar right now. You can find them exactly on Twitter. Maybe tomorrow, even in the table, they are sitting. And if we add the information, the medical record information, we maybe can find who has my same blood type, or maybe I can know who in the bar have a non-desirable medical record, and I can decide who to meet, you know, in the bar because I want healthier children. No? So if we already have discrimination in this world, with that kind of data or with information we are sharing or using in apps, also in rural areas, I don't know, and it's the question I want to ask you, what are the negative externalities of connecting the world this way?
We will come back to this negative externalities, but first we have two more people to speak. Yeah, do you want to move very briefly, please?
Yes, I think the current thing here is I've seen it where the most successful social impact ventures forget about technology for the first phase of development efforts. They totally forget about technology. What they do is they take an anthropological approach to this. To really make a social impact, you have to understand what the impact is going to be on the target market. Whether it's trying to make money or trying to make social impact, the same thing. And it goes into this whole theme today from the first keynote speaker that spoke about triage and how important it is to be immersed and understand their behaviors and then to that year, talking about the children, where he can't just communicate and just have them fill out surveys. He has to actually sit there with them and play with them and share that environment. Now, when we talk about social impacts in rural areas, unless you live in that culture, live that rural area, and you share the experience, the first suggestion is just to go there and live with them. I recently worked with a social impact venture that had a mobile app which tried to have positive impact in the rural community. And they had a very interesting approach. They went there for a month and lived with the community. There was progression. First of all, they didn't use any technology. They just sat there and observed, and made notes. And it was all about value systems and what different people in the community value. And they watched and observed, and then they progressed. So the next thing they did, they didn't give a smartphone. They introduced a regular phone, and they got somebody in the community that spoke the language and understood the culture to call certain families that had the phone and find out and throw certain questions in. And the person would be there observing who answered the phone, okay, based on the topic, what were the questions that were asked, then when the decision has to be made, who was part of the decision making, who ultimately made the decision. So this is a very powerful way to do it.
You had your presentation, I think, yesterday. It's over. Everybody has the microphone on the next person. Please. Thank you very much, David.
Hello, my name is Nicholas. I'm from Paris. And I'm a designer, so I'm not a tech guy, I guess. But I'm interested in technology. It's not technology for the technology. It's more technology for what makes sense. So I'm really interested about environmental issues and social issues as well. And I really like what you said that rural people have knowledge and they're smart. And I think it's also something that is good.
His name is Kabir. And your name is what?
Nicholas.
Kabir, this is Nicholas.
Yes, let's talk. So I think there is something that is going to be lost. It's knowledge of these kind of people, like endangered species, like the girl I'm wearing this t-shirt. It's also people that are not being focused on, and they have like really great knowledge. For example, how to make sustainable living in their own environment without technology, which would be technology is going to save us, but maybe it's not going to be like that. And also nature has great technology and design. For example,
but what David was telling us before is actually picking up on also what Kabir was saying.
Yeah.
Kabir was saying that we need more innovation centers or innovation, let's say, huts. Let's call it innovation hut. Okay, because otherwise it sounds like MIT or Harvard. We want to have make it very sound, very Nigerian, very villages. Let's have an innovation village. And then, make sure that people, through the ease of technology, actually become innovators. Is that something which you wanted to comment on as well? Why don't you say your name?
Yeah, my name is Johan Malmqvist. I'm a professor and an entrepreneur. I've founded several companies, between 10 and 20, I'm not sure. But I've been in IT for 45 years. And what I have heard...
Where were you 45 years ago?
Sorry?
Where were you 45 years ago?
45 years ago, somewhere.
How about you?
I know that.
Okay, good.
But the reason I wanted to tell you that is the worry about the technology we were talking about here. I've heard this so many times, and you don't need to worry. The technology will catch up with it. The thing you should focus on is give the young people a chance to invent, and the technology will catch up.
Thank you very much. This is an optimistic note, which means that
Roberto, any problem you see in terms of security, if you invent, you will be able to solve it. In fact, you wanted to speak to this.
Yeah, I just wanted to give two quick quotes or elaborations. When we say innovation, I see we always talk about knowledge, we talk about technology innovation. But what I would really like to see is knowledge innovation rather than technology innovation. Meaning that we want to think of the knowledge that already exists in communities and the knowledge that the communities require and need for their development. So this is the first note I really wanted to highlight, to really focus on the knowledge itself and then use the technology for passing over the knowledge.
And now I'm cutting you off. Just an opportunity to talk.
Just another small note.
I'm going to do something which is a social innovation. Can I show what the social innovation is?
Perfect, yeah.
Ask Jeff for permission if you can continue.
Can I just a small hint?
If only your time is going to be added to my
I can see the social innovation is to negotiate about time. Okay, so
you can go on. Yeah. 2 seconds. You go on.
Okay. Just 2 sentences. Again, we have been talking about communities, and the first thing we always talk, and I always hear, is what are the problems that exist in the community. I wish to see what are the assets that the communities can utilize for the future, rather than looking into problems only. Look into assets.
Jeff, this is your time. You can speak as long as you
thank you very much.
Spoken, but not longer.
Okay, well, you've heard my name already. Jeff Bravo is my name. I'm from Nigeria. I want to pick up from where she stopped, which is very important. She said, knowledge. Technology can exist, right? And from what the other professor said, he has been in the world of technology for 45 years. By then, I don't even know if I was being formed in the valley. Okay, a lot of us understand technology, but there are vast majority that don't even know what technology is all about, and that is where knowledge comes in. In my country right now, we are having an issue. 80% of the young people use mobile phones. And when I say mobile phones, I'm not talking about featured phones, smartphones. But what do they do with these smartphones? Do they actually use up to 40% of what smartphones should do to solve your problems? No, they don't. And because they don't have the knowledge, they don't have that understanding. Nobody has taken the time. Those who understand technology have not taken the time to put them through all this. That is where the problem comes in. Let me give you an example.
You have to tell us now what you think 80% of the young people in Nigeria use their mobile phones for. Tell us.
Okay, great. Now I will start from myself. Okay.
But this is a bad example.
Okay. I think a couple of months ago, we did something like a road show. We try to, because there's this habit, if people are walking on the road, you see them, touching their phones, and which is very dangerous. So we tried to do a road show sometime. I happened to follow up on a guy who was busy pressing his phone, so I was like, excuse me, can you please tell me what you're doing right now? And he was like, why? I said, I just want to know, I'm writing a book. So he said that he's responding to a message on Facebook. And I said, okay, after that, what are you going to do next? He said, nothing. That's going to check his mail. So basically, what that tells me is that a lot of people are just engaging themselves on social media or on their mobile phone, which is kind of good, right? But that's not the only feature that mobile phone provides for us, smart mobile phones. So I don't think that those people within my age range are doing all this with their smartphones. But there are other smart things that they can do with it. For instance, I attended an information conference on payment system, which was organized by my country, by the way. Now, we have this fear of technology in my country. A lot of people are so scared of using their credit card on the internet. because they have health.
Yes, you hit the so-called effect threshold, which is the time limit which we accept. No, but I think you made a very good point that people are using their mobile phone not for the things which is actually the social good.
Exactly.
Okay, this was your point, and I think we got it. And this is the end of it. And now we go on to the next person. And you hand the microphone to the professor, because the professor wants to add something which is really valuable insight, and he will be also as brief.
Okay, this is actually reinforces your point with a short story from Africa that really, I'm really glad.
By the way, he's from Africa.
Yeah, I know. And that's why it made me think about this, actually from origin. This is ancient history, but about 10, 12 years ago, when there were actually much fewer phones, or maybe no mobile phones, in many countries in Africa, and I was actually involved in advising some governments.
Okay, give us the story, because
the story is this.
The time.
The story is this investment project in mobile phones in Mauritania was helped by the fact that we were starting to build up stories on problems that could be solved. I sat with 5 Tuareg tribesmen in Timbuktu who told me they'd never used a phone in their lives, never heard a dial tone. Amazing. I explained to them what we were trying to do. And then they said, this could be very useful. And they started talking about putting chips in every camel. And the whole, that conversation started a whole process of collecting stories of how different problems in this country, Mauritania and Mali, where people were traveling for 3 days to get medicines and so on, maybe these could be solved by mobile phones, even before we launched the investment process. And by the time we got to tendering the documents and launching the licensing process, we developed a very clear idea of how this could play out. And we had in Mauritania the most successful mobile tendering process because of this.
Who is we?
Well, I was working for the World Bank, but we were advising the government of Mauritania. They had the most successful introduction of mobile communications into Africa. And because of this process.
We will have Cargill, then we have Nicky Jans, then we have Alfredo, remember? Yes,
what I would like to say is that, yes, technology is very important, mobile phone, having access to content, having access to infrastructure, that's all very important. But what I think is the most important is to create an environment where we will empower youth to be more courageous, more confident to undertake actions and to act and to put this technology into action. The reason why I'm saying that is that the environment is not following not only technology but also the demands of young people, the demands of screen ages. For example, if a young entrepreneur in my country would like to start a business, it has to go to the bank and write a business plan. And this is a very difficult process, especially because if the idea is something like the example that Mr. Simon said, this application that would delete the photograph after 10 minutes. Imagine that you go with a business plan for this application to our bank.
Simons was faster, 10 seconds.
So my point is we should first teach young people to be more confident and more courageous, and then to have those people change the environment in order for the environment to be more enabling for new ideas in order to make progress for the entire society.
Wonderful. We take 3 more interventions, and then we have the young people joining here again, because otherwise only the old people are sitting here. And then we close, because we want to have lunch, we want to get some sun, fresh air, put on the beach shoes, the clean shirts, and then get onto the train to go to the camp. So this is the narrative for the afternoon, but still we are here with Nicky Jans, please.
I felt that my contribution would have fitted in better 10 minutes ago, literally. So I'm taking the curve a little about, talk about innovation, and we've heard that this morning in a very strong session about innovation. I think there is a bit of a change of paradigm, and it's asking questions not what are we doing, but how are we doing it. I think when we talk about things that are available, it's like Lego building blocks, and so many people are looking for new Lego building blocks. People are waiting for new inventions, the next Facebook, the next Twitter, the next whatsoever. And I think it's time to take existing building blocks and repurpose and use innovation as a methodology for using existing building blocks to create something new.
Thank you. Janine, do you want to talk to this?
I wanted to speak to the developers and also the people who invest in this room. And the idea about iteration and developing things good enough, getting them out there, and then seeing how they respond. Because I see too many people in technology trying to get it perfect before they launch it and never get it launched, or miss the opportunity to get feedback from their users. Twitter started as a podcasting tool. The hashtag was invented by its users. There are many examples of that. And for the funders, I will just say briefly, when you get a business plan from someone in technology, or you give a grant to someone in technology, and it's based on their idea today, and 6 months or a year from now, you expect them to deliver that, you're making a mistake. You need to build in a mechanism for which to iterate through the process of funding, and not expect somebody to deliver what your initial idea was, but be open to the fact that the best return on your investment will probably be something you didn't think of until 6 months into the project.
Yes, I read some keywords I heard this morning about innovation, about the so-called digital natives or people self-trained in technology, the example from Africa, from other countries, about illiterate people having the chance to use computers without any problem. And this is connected directly with the recent concern about the digital divide on the reverse, so the need to reconnect this generation with the traditional values and put together our, let me say, patrimony with the new values, new interests of people. Because there's a kind of fracture on the reverse now. And sometimes we face some problems that seems to be new, but instead they were already solved in the past, such as IPR or moral and ethical problems that arose thanks to new technology but are still in our background. That's all.
Thank you very much for talking about the renaissance of classical values in the mobile age. Are you from Italy?
I'm from Italy.
Thank you very much.
The image that was presented is what mobile technology can do for the Western world. But if you look into the problem of the developing world, it looks like we are trying to use all recipes that maybe failed or maybe succeeded in the West, in the developing world. The problem in the developing world is primarily social innovation and also overcoming stereotypes. And the thing is that technology, if technology is smart, it can help you overcome those. If you read the book, for example, of Daniel Kahneman's Fast and Slow Thinking, you will see that how hard it is to remove from people's minds the stereotypes. But using today's media, today's technologies, you can be selective in the media that you present, and you can be selective on the people that you focus in the developing countries. Try to develop leaders and social activists that are equipped with the right information to make the change in the developing world. So the developing world doesn't have to go through the same paths and the same mistakes of the West. It's a big market by itself, but we have to try to develop tools that fit this market.
I think you're right, and I think that the governor of the state of Osaka this morning gave us a good example of how actually this is being done in this country and how this is being implemented. I think 3 more people can talk, and then we do a final roundup. If you just put the microphone onto the chair, that would be wonderful. First.
I'm really talking about this more in the context of Asia and just like Hong Kong and China, is the cultural tolerance to error. When we go for innovation, when we go for entrepreneurship, yesterday Ralph Salmon told me that the Angry Bird was the 42nd product of that particular company. So it took them 41 mistakes to make one successful case. But what I've seen, for example, in Hong Kong, is that our government have been giving out grants to this kind of startups, and they never use up the money because the official was afraid. He's afraid of putting a grant, and if the company goes belly up, he may be accountable. So really, we need to be tolerant to errors, to change, to serial entrepreneurs, So one day they maybe succeed. And if they fail, they still increase the social innovation capital. Because you have a group of youngsters in the society who have gone through the START exercise, they may not be successful in the first case, but they've learned, they've gained, and this is a social innovation capital. I think we need to pay attention to. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will start putting down the chairs because we're closing down the conversation. And I ask
Thank you, Bill. I actually wanted to go back to the origin of the first section of the discussion, which is to try to find social innovation from third world countries, come up and have those innovations actually implemented by a much greater good or existing technology other than mobile, and put it back into the villages without affecting their culture or their practice or their society. I know it's the most challenging thing, and in less than 30 days, I had to do this in Indonesia. And Indonesia is 380 million people in a small little villages, and we are building base stations all the way through there. The fear that we had is the base stations are just physical structures. We can paint them green, it's not a problem. But the fact that we put the mobile technology right in the middle of a village where they may have never seen a handphone, that worries me a bit. So we had to conduct studies. I projected an hourglass figure. An hourglass, you can see what an hourglass is. If you want innovation from the bottom up, you need to get a feedback. I agree with the lady just now. She mentioned that we need social activists at the ground who have a conscience, who want to improve its own state, bring the ideas up. We at the center of the core decide where we want to crowdsource outwards, get the solutions, get them to implement it at the bottom, without us interfering in this butterfly effect. I hope that helps.
Thank you very much. Can you put down the chair and pass the microphone?
And so I've been hearing a lot about what, like we have hardware, we have software, we have the Android, the Apple, the PC, and everything, we have e-content, right? We also have how we hear about to teach the young minds how to use e-content, how to use the hardware in rural places, in developing countries and all that, but I think we need to focus on why, because a lot that I've seen in my school, a lot of it that I've seen in my colleagues, they're not really interested in any of this because I don't think they know why is it so important other than to just build the economy and just to inform others, raise awareness and all that. But I think why is really important because I'm just seeing me and just one other 17, 16 years old here. And I think that needs to improve. Thank you.
I thank you very much and I welcome you being here. It's great that you are also giving us that perspective. It's clear that, especially when you are talking about technology and development, one has to start with the issue of why. And many people think about technology gives you more freedom, but with freedom comes also, as we know, destruction of some certain aspects if you're not careful and you're not taking responsibility. Last word to you. Introduce yourself, please, Anna.
I hope I won't be sacrificed. I'm almost I'm Anna from Brazil, and you were talking about technology transformation and knowledge transformation. And I think there is one aspect that I haven't really heard a lot here, that is the sustainable aspect of things. One of the challenges we have is that, I have a publishing platform, and with this platform, we expected to give people an opportunity to express themselves with meaningful ideas. But it's very beautiful in theory when you ask people to invest time to create an idea and to work on that and to share it with everybody, but you won't be recognized for that, you don't have the audience, you have to work on that. But unfortunately, what we see, and it's a challenge and work that we have to do, is to stimulate people to express their ideas, getting a sustainable process of that, you know. Making money, yes, we are talking about ideas with social things, but people need to live, and it's a right of them. And I don't see that, including in our users. We are in the very beginning, but what I see is a lot of people create content only to make money, easy money. And I think we have a challenge to stimulate younger people again with something that social media doesn't help, because people express themselves just for vanity in most of the cases. And it's how to stimulate young people to be meaningful, you know, in terms of back to develop real knowledge for the world and really make a difference.
Thank you very much, Anna. There's not much one can add to that kind of theme. You have seen that social innovation has also to do with how the chairs stand and how the conversation goes. I think we can go on with this kind of open space for quite a long time. But let's take a break and let's see that people are here not because of vanity, but because of achievement. And that is something which we can share in and celebrate tonight.